We have everyone. Yep, there's Commissioner Lanier. Turn up my volume a little bit. There's our city manager. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call this committee of the whole meeting to order. So, commissioners, we have a full agenda today. I'm going to start with a proclamation, and then we're going to move forward. We have 4 action items. I'll give our city manager an opportunity to update us on those. And then we have 2 important briefings right at the end. So we have our fiscal year 2020 performance management update, as well as a presentation on the Grand Rapids Police Department strategic plan. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this. And I'll ask everyone to put their microphones on mute as we get started, unless you're speaking, and then we'll move to action items. So we have a couple guests with us this morning as I read this proclamation, and I'll turn it over for a few words to our guests, and then we'll move to our 4 resolutions before us. And so today I have a proclamation recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. So I'm going to read this, and then I'll turn it over to our guest. So this proclamation reads, whereas the city of Grand Rapids has a long history of recognizing, celebrating, and honoring the vibrant diversity that is our community. And whereas the city of Grand Rapids recognizes and solemnizes Indigenous peoples, whose Indigenous Anishinaabe people nourished, preserved, and protected Badating as their ancestral territory, and to acknowledge their continued presence in the care taking of Bawating. And whereas the city of Grand Rapids recognizes the annexation of Anishinaabe people's homelands in order to build what is now Grand Rapids, and knows this indigenous civilization existed within and depended on this area since time immemorial. Whereas the city of Grand Rapids specifically acknowledges Bawating was inhabited by the Anishinaabe people of the 3 fires, Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. And whereas the city of Grand Rapids values that our society benefited from the technology, thought, and culture of these Indigenous peoples, and the benefits from these contributions endure as they continue to share their home and their way of life with all of us. Whereas the city of Grand Rapids desires to further efforts to support Indigenous inclusion into our present day understanding of our collective history, which can only be accomplished if governmental entities, organizations, and other public institutions change policies and practices to more accurately represent the Indigenous experience in order to promote the celebration of this country's first people. And whereas the city of Grand Rapids recognizes the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. Whereas the city of Grand Rapids recognizes that in 1990, representatives from 120 indigenous nations at the first Continental Conference of 500 Years of Indian Resistance unanimously passed a resolution to transform Columbus Day into an opportunity to educate the rest of the country about pre-existing resilient Indian cultures that survived an adverse and often violent colonization process and continue to exist and thrive in present-day America. Whereas the city of Grand Rapids understands the growing movement among Indigenous people and allies to 1, recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the 2nd Monday in October, 2, to use Indigenous Peoples Day to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples of this land, and 3, to celebrate the thriving culture and value that Indigenous people add to communities throughout and well beyond the Grand Rapids region. Whereas the city of Grand Rapids celebrates and honors its strong history of Indigenous activism. Whereas the United States federal government recognizes Columbus Day on the 2nd Monday of October in accordance with the federal holiday that was established in 1937. The city of Grand Rapids does not recognize nor celebrate this federal holiday. And now, therefore, I proclaim that the city of Grand Rapids hereby and henceforth recognizes Indigenous Peoples Day on the 2nd Monday of October, and further proclaim that the city of Grand Rapids shall continue in its efforts to promote the well-being and growth of the Grand Rapids Indigenous peoples. Now, therefore, I, Rosalind Bliss, Mayor of the City of Grand Rapids, do hereby and henceforth proclaim and recognize the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Grand Rapids. And I urge all residents to use this day to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous people on this land and to celebrate the thriving culture and value that Indigenous people add to communities throughout and beyond the Grand Rapids region. And I encourage other businesses and organizations and public entities to also recognize this important day. Signed by Rosalind Bliss. So with me today, thank you, commissioners, for your support. And then with me today, I have Cami Castaneda, and I'd like to present this proclamation to her, and we're going to have a more formal ceremony doing that in the upcoming days. And so I'm going to turn over the microphone to Cami to say a few words and also to say thank you for your work, really the work of the entire Community Relations Commission and Stacy Stout, who has helped lead this here within the city. So Cami?
How bonjour. I am truly honored to accept on behalf of our Indigenous community here in Grand Rapids. I would like to thank and acknowledge the many voices that were instrumental in these efforts. This proclamation truly reflects our strength and resilience. And I'd like to say Kachimigwech to the City of Grand Rapids and the Commission for acknowledging and celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. Aha.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Again, I want to say, I know Stacy Stout is with us as well. It doesn't look like her camera's on, but I want to make sure that again, there you are. Stacy, again, thank you for all of your leadership, but also in shepherding this through and getting it to me today. So thank you.
Thank you. I also want to give a shout out to Patty Cottle, who is also on the team. So thank you so much, everyone, Commission and Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And commissioners, will make sure that you know about some of the celebrations that we'll be having here locally, that you are all welcome to join us in. So with that, we'll move to our next item. We actually have 4 items that are interrelated, and to tee these up, and before we get to them, I'd like to turn to our city manager so that he can provide an overview and give us a little background. City.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, members of the City Commission staff. Yes, I think it would be better if we had an overview of these 4 items since they're all related to our continued business continuity during COVID and ways in which both business and entities can operate during the pandemic. And for that, what I'll do is I'll ask Mr. Canfield if he will turn his camera on and provide an overview, and then after, Mayor, it would be preferable if you would take the SERI item for the Commission's consideration. And between him and Ms. Turkelson, they will walk through the items. Mr. Canfield?
All right. Thank you, City Manager. Can you hear me? All right. And we do have a presentation. We do have a presentation that is queued up. Mr. Kane, thank you for that. All right. So, Mayor, as you and the City Manager mentioned, these items are interrelated. They all are related to outdoor activation in support of the city's continued economic recovery. And these items will actually span through the spring, May 31 specifically. So with that, I'll just note that there are 4 items. They're numbers 2 through 5 on the agenda in case anyone is following along on the actual document. The first would extend the COVID-19 recovery special event that you authorized at the end of May. This is the resolution that authorizes the continuation of social zones. The next item is the one Ms. Turkelson will describe. It would approve a new City Commission policy to allow outdoor temporary uses and structures to continue on private property. The third is a resolution allowing outdoor wood fires on college and university properties for the duration of the public health crisis. And then the fourth is an item that will be familiar to you. It would recommend approval of more social district permit applications to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. Next slide, please. So item 2 on your agenda is the one that would extend the COVID-19 recovery special event, as in social zones. It would build on and replace your previous resolution, the one that you approved in a special meeting on May 21st. That's what actually brought us social zones. This resolution would extend the time frame, as I mentioned, through May 31. So that would bring us to a full 12 months of authorization of social zones. And the proposed resolution does include some key additions. Seasonal adjustments related to snow removal, drainage, and other service requirements would be needed to be completed by mid-November. The installation of heating devices, as in propane or electrical heaters, would be approvable by the fire department. Wood fires would also be approvable by the fire department, but on a pilot basis and consistent with our existing recreational fires ordinance, they would need to be at least 120 feet from occupied residences. Tents, canopies, and temporary structures would be approvable by building inspections. Bicycling, skateboarding, and similar activities would not be allowed within dining areas of social zones. We think this is important for public health reasons, and the Kent County Health Department agrees. Solicitation in a threatening or disorderly manner or within 12 feet of a dining area would also be prohibited. And again, this is for public health reasons. And non-compliance would be a civil infraction punishable by a $50 fine. And with that, I'll turn the next slide over to Ms. Turkelson.
Thank you, Lou. Item number 3 is a new city commission policy that would provide us with some greater flexibility in the use of outdoor space on private property for businesses that are negatively impacted by COVID. The policy is written to expire on May 31st or upon the expiration of the state of emergency, whichever occurs first. However, the policy does provide me with the opportunity to work with businesses and establish a 10-day transition period to move activities from outdoor to indoor to comply with the regulations. And it is also subject to renewal. The policy itself is subject to renewal by City Commission. So over the summer, the Planning Department has been utilizing the temporary use permits that are authorized by the zoning ordinance, but the current ordinance regulations are too limiting for us to continue that utilization. We simply need more tools in our toolbox to continue to support the needs of businesses through the winter months. So the policy will allow the Planning Department to consider the creative use of space and structures while also trying to mitigate any potential impacts to adjacent residential uses through reasonable hours of operations, limits or prohibition on amplified sound, and providing some separation between uses.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, item 4 on the agenda would allow outdoor wood fires on college and university properties that meet certain requirements. So they would be allowed on properties that are zoned special district, institutional campus, or planned redevelopment district that contain a residential dormitory associated with an educational use. This would be connected with the declared public health emergency and state of disaster. So this is a temporary measure that is intended to encourage students to spend more time outdoors, thereby reducing the potential spread of COVID-19. And you can see that there are 3 colleges and universities that would be eligible under this framework. This is supported by the Kent County Health Department as tending to reduce indoor close contact and increase compliance with physical distancing guidelines. Next slide, please. All right, and this is the 4th item of this package, item 5 on the agenda. This is the one that will look very familiar to you. It's similar to 4 previous resolutions that you've approved since July 21 and recommends approval by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission of the 3 qualified licensees that you see here in order for them to obtain a social district permit, which would allow them to sell alcohol on their licensed premises to be carried out and consumed within the social district. So inclusive of this resolution, you would have recommended approval of 41 of these social district permit applications. And that concludes our presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Canfield. City Manager, anything to add before I open it up to see if commissioners have questions?
Nothing else, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Canfield? All right. I'll start with Commissioner Asasi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and putting it together like this. I think that's helpful, not only for us, but for the public. Mr. Canfield, our city manager, can you talk a little bit about last meeting? We talked about the proposed ordinance for smoking in parks, and we talked about, excuse me, the enforcement and what that looks like. And so I just want to hear a little bit more about the civil infraction for being, threatening, or I can't remember the other word that was used, or being within the 12 feet. Can you talk a little bit about the enforcement and what that looks like?
Sure, I can begin. So the $50 civil infraction is something that we hope isn't needed or is quite rare. The idea behind all of this is first, we would want, where appropriate, a business where there is some kind of disorderly conduct or someone encroaching in that 12-foot area, to let the person who's doing that know, that conduct is not permissible at this time. And, hopefully there would be significant compliance based on that. But, after that point, it is likely that they would call the non-emergency number, assuming it's not an emergency. And, a city law enforcement person would stop by and, provide similar guidance. And I think the actual ticketing would be a last resort, as it is typically.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Canfield. I would say, Commissioner Asasi, our expectations would be similar to the behavior or the management of behavior inside of a business. We would expect them to take those same reasonable actions for behavior that would occur outside in the social zone. So if the same kind of behavior were occurring inside their premises, there would be, hopefully, as Mr. Canfield said, either by one of the employees or management asking for compliance assistance. And typically people do comply. And the chief is also on the line. He could speak about the frequency in which officers have to eventually intervene. But our hope is that is rare and infrequent.
Thank you, City Manager. All right, Commissioner Lanier, you had a question?
I did. Thank you, thank you, Mayor, for the acknowledgement. And City Manager, thank you for that response. That was actually going to be one of my questions, just to clarify that this essentially provides the business owner with the same rights they would have within their four walls into this social zone that they would be operating their business. And so it doesn't really change, with the exception that it just extends what they would normally do within their places of business. And then, so my other question is tied to the fires. And so I'm happy to hear, I know that there was a request to have those fires in more urban environments where there are more people. So I'm happy to hear that we're looking at college campuses with the hope, and then even to hear that the health department has been involved in support having those fires as a temporary measure to get people outside of those closed quarters like dorms, because last meeting we talked about smoking and removing smoking or disallowing smoking in public places, and then this very next meeting, we're now talking about fire, which, you know, has emissions that are harmful. So I am curious to know what our fire chief thinks of having the fires in places like college campuses, because I know that on college campuses, it also increases the number of people who may be exposed to those fires. So I'm just curious if Chief Lehman is on the line, if I may, Mr. City Manager, ask for his input.
Yes, he should be on standby, and I'm sure he is happy to talk about putting out fires. Chief, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Of course, your fire chief is not excited about having fires burning everywhere. At the same time, I understand the risk of having what we consider a controlled event with proper supervision and proper ordinances in place to be able to control that. As for the emissions generated by a fire, this is clean, dry firewood that is allowed by these exceptions. And so I don't necessarily believe that that's not my area. That's the health department's area. That's the department, the DEQ's area to really weigh in on that. But I would say from a security and safety standpoint, as long as I have had a lot of input into this decision, as well as the fire marshal, and I do feel comfortable with the ways that we have gone about allowing for this.
And Chief, if I could add, Chief, we have had those policy discussions, commissioners. You alluded to and several of your colleagues about making sure that we are very deliberate in how we're rolling this out. And so the college campus is a very controlled environment. And even with the permitted activity in social zones, it will be controlled and will require the rigorous review and permitting by our fire marshal. So that is the extent in which we are looking at this now as a pilot. Beyond that, if there are other event type of activities or special events, the special event office will be involved, as well as the fire department, in reviewing the permitted request to make sure that it is appropriate and safe.
Thank you for that. So there are social zones where the fires will be permitted as well. And have those been identified, and the size of them and what those would look like?
So they could be permitted, and I would ask Mr. Canfield to if you could turn back his camera on and to talk about, he and the fire chief, about some of the restrictions that we would have within those social zones.
Sure. So within the social zones, our goal is to have the same or as similar as possible set of rules as we have for the recreational fire program, which you're probably aware gives residents within 120 feet an opportunity to object. So the way we're dealing with that is we are simply saying these can't be had within 120 feet. So no one who would have been notified under the recreational fire permit program is disadvantaged by this. The 120-foot buffer applies. And then the chief mentioned seasoned dry firewood. That's a requirement to minimize smoke. The size of the container is limited, I think, to a 3-foot container. And our expectation in the social zones is that the fire will be continuously attended by someone who has readily available an extinguisher, and also that they will, bring the fire pit and fuel with them. And then when it's done, they will take all of that away, so there isn't this potential hazard remaining. So the chief may wish to offer some more perspective on this, but our goal is to have it be a limited pilot that's done in a safe manner and in a way that does not have an impact on nearby residents.
Thank you. So if you think about the social zones, for example, in front of Butchers Union, that is not a place that we would allow for a open fire. If you think about the social zone up on Monroe, and that would be towards the river, there's a parking space area that is more than 120 feet from the business. It would be allowable as long as all those other conditions are met in an area like that.
Okay.
Direction.
Okay, that helps a lot with kind of understanding the context. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And Mr. Canfield, just to reiterate, this is part of our pilot, so we'll be assessing it. And again, similar to other pilots, and I know not everyone in government uses the word experiments, but I feel like we're experimenting a lot this year. We will learn, and if we need to pivot or make a change, we can do that. But we want to do everything we can. As Commissioner Lanier said, we need people to continue to be outside. We know that that's a safe place for them. We know that this is really essential to support our businesses as we go into cooler weather. And so we're going to try our best to provide those opportunity for businesses to thrive even as we continue through this pandemic. So, and I'm assuming, Mr. Canfield, you'll keep us abreast of any issues that may come up or if we need to make any changes.
Well, we will make sure you're informed and we will monitor this closely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your work on this. Any other questions before we actually get to the action items? Commissioner Moody?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Canfield, for the report, and Chief and City Manager. I have a question in reference to those social zones. In reference to the restaurants, are restaurants allowed to use gas pits at all? Maybe the fire chief can ask that question.
Wait for the fire chief to come up, but Ms. Canfield knows as well. So yes, the fire marshal would have the ability to review both the natural wood burning as well as the gas burning apparatus that are being used in the outdoor areas.
Okay, so would colleges have the same opportunity to use gas pits instead of wood burning pits? They choose to do so?
Yes.
Sure, that would be their options, but I think part of it is obviously it's warming, and the other part is I guess when people choose it, it's ambiance, it's the feel of the environment, and so I don't think we would regulate. Or perhaps there would be. I don't want to speak out of turn, but Chief or Ms. Canfield, what would be the moments in which we would be more preferable to a gas burning device versus a wood burning device?
Sure. Well, so a gas burning device, of course, doesn't have the same sort of emissions issue that you get with wood. And if someone purchases a heater or a gas fire pit and places it on their own property, as long as it's a standard listed unit that is placed in a safe way, a separate city approval isn't required. That's private property. On the right of way, we are requiring it because there just are so many potential safety concerns related to the right of way, vehicles, pedestrians, and so on. So that's why in the social zones, businesses will need to get permission from the fire department before placing heaters or propane fire pits. But I guess the easiest way to put it is you can have a propane fire pit really anywhere you would have a possibility of a wood fire pit, but the reverse isn't true. We're defining pretty tightly where the wood fires could be.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate hearing that.
Great, thank you. Good question, Commissioner. Okay, I think with that, then I'll read the resolutions. Oh,
I just have one other. This is just more of an administrative question. I just want to, in the the resolution for the changes, number 4, did that go to public safety before it came to us, or is it going to go after? Because I know in the past we've talked about, particularly for home use at public safety. So I just want to clarify that.
I don't think this item has been before the Public Safety Committee. I know we did a recovery, a COVID briefing at the last minute, but I don't know if this specific item went before the committee. I would defer to staff or any other members of the committee.
So the fire proposal did not, and we certainly could go there to discuss how it's working. I think our rationale is, we've developed this quickly with the idea that we want to get it in place before, it gets too cold and students are trapped, in their dorms. So, our idea was to try and get it in effect as quickly as possible by bringing it to you today, and then adjust as needed based on how it's working. And part of that adjustment could be your feedback during a future public safety committee meeting.
That's. I just wanted to clarify. Obviously, COVID rules are applying here. We're moving very quickly on things. I just wanted to, as we go back to that conversation about what different bodies do. I know when I was previously on that, we had talked extensively about personal fires in backyards and things like that. So, thank you, Mr. Canfield.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a public safety meeting today, so we can always add this and give a quick 5-10 minute update. And then obviously it'll be back before us tonight. So that would provide a little bit of time for public safety and the members of public safety to also hear about this and provide any input. Okay, I think with that, we'll go ahead and move forward then. I'll start with the first resolution. This is a resolution extending COVID-19 recovery as a special event to take place within the city of Grand Rapids from June 1st, 2020 until May 31st, 2021. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any questions or comments about extending this timeline? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and ask our city clerk to call for the vote.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier?
Aye.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Mayor Bliss?
Yes, it carries. All right, that will take us to our second resolution. This is a resolution approving a new city commission policy to allow certain outdoor temporary uses and structures on private property with an expedited review and approval process. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any questions about this item? I see Ms. Turkelson is still available. All right, seeing none, I'll ask our city clerk to call for the vote.
Commissioner Lanier?
Aye.
Commissioner Jones?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Mayor Bliss?
Yes, it carries. All right, next up will take us to a resolution allowing outdoor recreational wood fires on properties zoned special district institutional campus or special district planned redevelopment district that contain a residential dormitory associated with an educational use subject to certain limitations to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any additional questions about this item? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and turn to our city clerk.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier?
Aye.
Mayor Bliss?
Yes, it carries. All right, and then it'll take us to our fourth item, and this is a resolution recommending approval by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission on multiple social district permit applications pursuant to Public Act 124 of 2020.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, any questions about these locations? All right, seeing none, I'll turn to our city clerk.
Commissioner O'Connor? Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, thank you, commissioners. I will now turn this over to our city manager, and he will take us through our next two items and updates. These are going to be a little bit lengthy. Hopefully you all received the information and the hard packet that was delivered to all of us yesterday. I'm not sure about all of you. I haven't had a chance to read through all of it, but I'm sure we'll be briefed on the information. And then if you have follow-up questions after you've had a chance to read through it, you can always follow up with city staff. So with that, I'll turn it to our city manager and let him take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I'm going to ask all staff, if you're not briefing at this time, if you would please turn off your cameras and your mics. Thank you again, Mayor and Commissioners, for your time this morning. We wanted to talk to you about our report of performance in many of the areas of the organization, because over the past few months, much of our conversation has been dominated by discussions of, and rightfully so, of the pandemic, police reform, the recession, and of course, cannabis. But we manage so many more things in this organization to make sure that even during these challenging times, we were providing the public with essential services. And so what we would like to do is share our performance management report, some of the highlights, and I think what you'll see is some of the progress that we have made in key accomplishments according to our city's 4-year strategic plan, in light of some of the challenges that are being experienced throughout our community and our country. I'm so pleased with the response of our employees every day. Our municipal staff rise to the occasion to provide services that are very vital to our community. I want to thank them for being so resolute and committed during these hard times. Some people view it as I'm going to work, but I know that many people view their jobs every day as I'm coming to serve, and I want to thank them. So while we continue to operate in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and so oftentimes ambiguous environment, it is not like we do not have a North Star. We do have a battle plan, if you will, with our strategic roadmap that allows us to look not only at the moment, the issues that we face day to day, or what you might be hearing from constituents, whether it's concerns, fear, or frustrations from the moment, but also allows us to look beyond the moment, 3 to 5 years ahead, to make sure that our future continues to be brighter and better than our present day. So I'm pleased that we have maintained focus as an organization on our North Star without panicking, but with careful planning and execution that has led to pragmatic municipalism that has allowed us not only to maintain services, but innovate in times of crisis. You just heard in the conversation around the social zones, as we are experimenting and using the mayor's word, we are also innovating in times of crisis and finding solutions that will more than likely be with us even after the pandemic. 6 months ago, staff would have told us that it was impossible for a large majority of our workforce, as well as for our elected officials, to have effective experiences teleworking and telecommuting. We've also would have said 6 months ago that it would be impossible to have many long-term major street closures for business support and assistance. But overnight, we have basically done the unimaginable and implemented and innovated in these difficult times. So I continue to be amazed at our resilience during the recession and how we have adjusted to adversity during this recovery. The report that you will hear today will serve as the foundation of future planning efforts at your October 30th retreat, as this will be the framework. It'll show you what we have done, but there's also a report of some of the things that have been delayed because of the pandemic, and we will be able to prioritize whether or not we continue to push the forward button on some of those matters during our planning, or we continue to press the pause button. And I must say that organizations do grow weary and exhausted in crisis because they lack the discernment of which buttons to push. You can't push forward on everything during a crisis, and you can't push pause and be paralyzed and only focus on one thing. So I look forward to our strategic conversation in the coming weeks, and I believe that you will find this report helpful in preparing for that. I'm forever grateful again to the city, team of city employees whose names are too numerous to mention. And you'll see that as we hear the report out from the multitude of staff that will serve as representatives for the various areas of the report. But I'm proud to serve this organization as this community as city manager and the chief executive officer of this organization. So to all the staff and community members and our partners, please accept my verbal thanks. And as I told my staff before, my virtual hug if you will, for all that you do. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Allison Sutter, who's our Chief Sustainability and Performance Management Officer, who without her and her team, the conversation that we were having today would be very challenging, if not impossible, because they have been very deliberate in ensuring our value of accountability with intentional planning, reporting, measuring, and monitoring. And we would not be where we are today without them and many others who you will hear from. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Sutter.
Thank you, City Manager. Appreciate your introduction. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Happy to be here today to help share some of the great accomplishments that our city team collectively has been able to achieve over the fiscal year 2020. As City Manager said, I would like to take just a few moments here to highlight a couple of things. In addition to the slides that we'll be showing today, it's about a 90-page full detailed fiscal year 2020 performance management report. For those in the community, I just want to let them know that those documents are available, as well as the slides that we'll be reviewing at grandrapidsmi.gov/strategic plan. So you can find those documents there, and they're available for our community. And then I also, before we jump into the slides, wanted to take a minute to actually call out a few people for thanks who have helped with the extraordinary amount of work that's been done. City Manager mentioned I have two people on my team in particular, Mr. João Oliveira, as well as Ms. Annabelle Wilkinson, who helped a lot with both reports and the content. Michael Moore did the tremendous design work, so I really want to give a shout out to him for the design work for the report and the presentation. Of course, working with the customer service and innovation team with Ms. Becky Jo Glover, Mr. Zach Teal, and Ms. Alex Melton, helping get the website up as well as our dashboard. And then today you'll see a number of presenters who are our executive leads or our objective leads who are going to be co-presenting with myself and the city manager today. So a big thanks to them as well as other staff who really are the ones on a day-to-day basis doing this work. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our slides now so we can jump into that presentation. Okay, so hopefully you are all seeing the slides, and I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Just a quick overview of some of the items that we're going to review today. I'm going to provide a few opening comments just around the context of what the scope of our fiscal year 2020 performance management report and efforts are. We'll have an update on some of the accomplishments around COVID-19 for response and recovery, a little overview on some of the key metric dashboards, as well as the quantitative analysis of qualitative performance, which is quite a mouthful, but that's a way where we're measuring all of the qualitative work that we're doing. And then really the bulk of the presentation is going to be team members giving a highlight of some of the key accomplishments. We, of course, don't have the time to review in detail all of the accomplishments that have been achieved, but really wanting to call out some of those significant accomplishments that we'll review in the cadence of the strategic plan, so by priority and objective. And then at the end, wanting to take a few minutes to reflect through the lens of our values and really highlight some of those accomplishments that align to our values, and then wrap up with just a couple notes on some next steps. So with that, always want to start and channel with our values and the reminder of our 6 core values of accountability, collaboration, customer service, equity, innovation, and sustainability. Staff are working every day to make decisions through the lens of these values and to continue to ensure that we are just living by these values and making decisions while we work to achieve the mission of the organization to elevate the quality of life through excellent city services. So a few opening comments just around the scope. So this performance report is specific to fiscal year 20. So those perhaps outside of the city not as familiar. That means it runs from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. This is the first year under our strategic plan, which was passed in April of 2019. And as city manager mentioned, it is a 4-year plan. We're going to review throughout the presentation today information from our key metric dashboard, as well as I'll refer to it as Invisio. It's a software platform we're using to help measure performance, and then also staff identified accomplishments. So again, here, just to give you a little bit of a view and a picture of what you'll see in that larger report, but the accomplishments are first going to be discussed with respect to COVID-19. That really obviously had a tremendous impact on the work that was completed, and so want to acknowledge that very significant work and accomplishments achieved there, but also having other significant work done even with the pandemic. And then we'll review some of the metrics, as well as you'll get accustomed to the circle charts that we'll be showing, and I'll review those and how that helps to measure our performance under the priorities and objectives in the plan that will be broken down. And then we will wrap up with an overview of each of the 6 values. And also just wanted to take a moment here because yesterday we were preparing for today, and just wanted to give a shout out to the team that while we are physically distanced often, we are still working together as a team. And this has been a tremendous team effort to pull this information together in these presentations. So I really just wanted to give a shout out to the team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Allison Ferroli to get us started with the COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Ms. Sutter. So as we have mentioned, COVID-19 has definitely had a major impact, but we wanted to outline our key accomplishments with the response and recovery to COVID-19. With that, we were able to maintain services to the community through the stay-at-home order. Public safety was able to redeploy personnel and resources to continue services with little interruption. We paused collection of water and sewer penalties. The Economic Recovery and Resiliency Work Group developed recommendations for the investment of $6.8 million federal and local dollars. And we were able to expand the Neighborhood Match Fund to focus on COVID-19 neighborhood and resident resiliency and racial healing. Next slide. We were also able to implement permitting pathways for restaurant and/or bar businesses to increase the availability of outdoor seating areas in response to COVID-19 in collaboration with DGRI and community partners. We implemented an innovative remote work policy, managed and supported major technology shifts into a virtual work environment, which included solutions to ensure public meetings were able to continue. We also reopened park facilities and the golf course in accordance with the governor's executive orders. Next slide. As far as our facilities go, we made some specific renovations and modifications, which included a secure lockdown of facilities and implemented a screening and check-in process at all facilities. We installed safe drinking fountains and safety barriers at several front office locations, and then also modified collaboration spaces in common areas. With that, we also increased signage and communications to the public and city staff throughout those facilities. And then finally, we were able to implement vehicle sanitation processes to ensure safety for city operators and mechanics, as well as enhance janitorial and custodial services in all facilities.
Thank you. So as Ms. Ferroli demonstrated, of course, there's quite a bit more work that's been done around the COVID response and recovery, but really wanting just to highlight some of those significant accomplishments and keeping in the back of our mind, as City Manager said in the opening, that while it has had an impact, of course, on the work that we're able to complete as staff, there's still a tremendous amount of achievements that have been accomplished. And so I just wanted to provide a little context on both the dashboard as well as some of the Invisio charts, just to help everybody understand what we're showing. So with respect to the key metric dashboard, as a reminder, you Commission helped identify 37 of the 140 metrics in our strategic plan to place on a key metric dashboard about a year ago. And we presented some preliminary results of how we were performing on those metrics early in February of this year with our mid-year performance management update. And so the team has been working. We've successfully built out 21 of those metrics, which are available on the dashboard link that you can find here. And we'll continue to add metrics as we're able to and as we continue to get data and to streamline that process. I do want to call out, in collaboration with Ms. Stout at the Office of Equity and Engagement, we also have a demographics statement that is included on our website and available through our dashboard. If you all remember, as a part of our plan, we committed to disaggregating all of our data by race, ethnicity, gender identity, and geography to the extent possible. And so I really encourage everyone to review this statement. I think it does a fantastic job of explaining what type of information we currently have that we're collecting and that we're reporting on, and to help learn why right now we're not able to report on all of the data in the ideal state that we would like to, due to some of the processes and the legal requirements that are in place with respect to certain information that is being requested, particularly around binary gender identification. But we will continue to update this, and the website is available here. So again, just would really encourage you to check out that website. So just a real quick high-level overview of the elements of each of the metrics you'll see. You'll see each of these tiles with the metric name. You'll see the most recent data point or measure. The time frame is included. Oftentimes it is the calendar year or the fiscal year. And then there are 4 status that will be identified by the color of the particular metric. So green would indicate that the goal has been met. A gold color would mean that we are near the goal. Blue is we are measuring where a goal has not yet been identified. And red would indicate that the goal has not been achieved. And then, of course, on this tile here, you'll also see the goal is being identified, and you can click to see more details. I won't go through all of this, but this is where you'll really get more of the details around each of the metrics. We are and have worked to provide 5 years of historic data for all of the metrics to the extent possible. And anyone has the ability always to click on a link to view the source data, which provides access to the raw data so that anybody who's interested in performing their own analysis on the data has that raw data available so that they can do so. We explain a little bit about the data, why it's important, how we're collecting it, indicate if there have been any impacts since the March 2020 stay-at-home order was put in place, and then, of course, showing the data disaggregated by demographics when that's available. So now switching gears to Invisio. These are 2 software tools that we are using to measure our performance. And what I just showed you, Socrata and the dashboard, is what we are using to measure our quantitative metrics in the strategic plan. And we were able to procure Invisio, which is another web-based software platform that we are using to track our qualitative work. And it helps us track that qualitative work in a more quantitative way, so we can understand, based on the projects and the work that's being accomplished, how far have we come in trying to achieve our stated objectives and goals. And so just to orient you a little with respect to the charts that you'll see that are generated from Invisio, this slide is showing a roll-up of performance for everything in fiscal year 2020 under the entire strategic plan, so all 6 priorities. And so there are most often 2 graphs you'll see. The one on the left is called the status. And so when staff go in to indicate the work that was done for each of the activities, they identify, was the work completed? Is the work on track? Has it experienced some disruption or major disruption? And so being able to indicate, are we still on track to achieve this on the identified deadline by which we said that we would? And so here, I do just want to call out, I think it's pretty amazing that across the plan, you'll see just about 30% experience some disruption or major disruption, which I think is pretty significant in light of COVID. And then on the right-hand side, the numeric progress update, staff also have the ability to then indicate on a scale of 0 to 100% how far has this activity been completed. So staff, and it could be multiple years. So if something is said, okay, this is going to take 2 years to complete, staff might go in at the end of the first year and say, we're about 60%. We achieved a little more than we had anticipated in the first year. And so they're able to provide a measure of what actually has been completed. And so for fiscal year 20 across the city, we have about 54% has been completed as our progress update. This orange bar right here is showing that if we had met all of the deadlines that we had created last fall, we would have been performing closer to that orange line. But again, with the unknown and unanticipated impacts of COVID, I think this demonstrates that as a whole, the city has really been able to stay on track with a large majority of the work that we had intended to have completed in fiscal year 20. So I'm not going to go through all of these charts. These are just for reference, but we do have the ability to have these charts at the priority level, which we have 6, and at the objective level. So the first one we were looking at was really across the entire plan to understand performance. And this slide shows now if we were to look at each of the priorities, so governmental excellence, economic prosperity and affordability, engage and connected community, etc., you would be able to then drill in and better understand performance under each of those specific priorities. It does provide the outcome statement here, as well as identifying how many activities fall within those particular priorities that we are measuring through this tool. And so I did want to share, I've been working closely with the representative, the customer service manager from Invisio. He has really shared that their entire organization has been really pretty blown away with the Grand Rapids team and how well we have embraced this tool, how quickly we have gotten it implemented. This is something where staff really only started using about 4 months ago. And of course, with budget and COVID and police reform, staff have been very busy. So a big appreciation to them for also making the time to learn a new tool and utilize it so that we can perform these types of measurements. But they are holding up Grand Rapids at this time as a best case scenario and a best practice with respect to their other customers. And a real appreciation to my colleagues for jumping in and working with this tool. So now we're going to start and get into the actual update on the accomplishments. We'll go by each of the 6 priorities. And I'll just start off. I won't go into too much detail, but for each of the priority areas, we'll start off. Here's governmental excellence. We have 5 metrics that are included on our key metric dashboard. So you can see 3, the goal have been met, and 2, we're at a point where we are measuring, but a goal has not been established. And those are broken down by the objectives, so you can understand our performance with respect to those particular metrics. And then the second slide that you'll see for each of the priority areas, again, I won't go into detail and you'll get used to the cadence as we go through each of the 6 priorities, but this then looks at, there are 6 objectives within our governmental excellence priority. And so similar to how you could break down the charts at the priority level, we can also look specifically within governmental excellence. Our first objective is to embed equity throughout government operations. So this top circle chart on the top left then helps us understand how are we performing with respect to that specific objective. And then the second one would be foster and maintain fiscal sustainability, so that you can start to understand how we're performing within each of those specific areas. And so with that, I think we have some team members who are going to come online and are going to help present through some of the different slides throughout governmental excellence and the other strategic priorities.
Thank you. My video is not working, but I will, hopefully you can hear me. So key accomplishments of government excellence was, a big one was that we applied a racial equity lens
We can't hear nor see you. I'm not. Is anybody else having difficulty hearing her?
I am. I thought it was on my end, but
can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will start again. So key accomplishments of government excellence, embedding equity, was racial equity a lens was applied throughout the entire FY21 budget process. Prior to then, it was 1 project per department. So that was a great upgrade. Implementation of the equitable economic development and mobility plan rolled out the frameworks and new ways of working. And as you know, that plan had a lot of community voice in it as well. Economic development strengthened utilizations of MBEs, or minority business enterprise, among contractors seeking incentives. In partnership with groups and other departments, the Office of Equity and Engagement worked on several policies via an equity lens. The Equal Business Opportunity Policy, also known as the MLBE policy, construction guidelines. We passed the Human Rights Ordinance. We drafted new policy to create employee resource groups, and also drafted language access policy, among others. We received a grant and hired a full-time equity analysis dedicated to the river work, who is showing excellent results. We also adopted an equity-focused legislative agenda. And lastly, implemented the city's compliance plan for indigent defense standards. Next slide.
Okay, the next slide is fiscal sustainability. One thing that the city has done well over the past, few years is maintaining all of our fiscal policies. Maintaining that GOF reserve at or above 15%, the budget stabilization fund at or above 10%. And the GOF contingency, we try to keep that at 1.5 million or above. And then the contributions, we always make the actuarial determined employer contributions, what's suggested to us to maintain good health in our pension and OPEB systems, as well as asset management plans across the city are on track. All of these things I'll report on more at the end of October when we do the fiscal year in review presentation. But so far, we are tracking, we are still well with these policies. And in that vein of thought, we did go through a bond or a ratings review with Moody's a month ago. They do an annual checkup of sorts to, let us know how we are performing. And when you consider what our city has had to endure in, this 2020 calendar year, it's been a little wild on the fiscal side, but because we have adhered to these strong fiscal policies and we look very strong, we're still very appealing investment when we look at going into the market and finding people that will purchase our debt. We're still considered high quality grade. We're slightly stronger. In the United States, the average or the median rating is a AA3 for cities. So we are slightly stronger than that median, and we're cited for our robust financial position. We have a considerable tax base, adequate wealth, income profile, and a light debt burden. Again, we do have a significant pension liability, but relative to other cities, we are performing very well there. So we just keep working on it. Also, for fiscal sustainability, we added the major fund monthly report to the fiscal committee. And we've also automated billing and streamlined processing for income tax.
Good morning. The third aspect is about employees and how do we attract, hire, train, and retain high-performing employees. The first way is that we successfully manage the transition of healthcare providers from Meritain Health to Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's been a very positive change. We get much better discounts, much better in-network utilization, and that saves both the city and employees money and also helps them to have better tools to navigate the healthcare system and get affordable and appropriate care. We managed significant changes associated with the shift to the virtual work environment as a result of COVID-19. Teleworking is a big part of that, as well as virtual wellness opportunities, moving our wellness platform online, as well as moving forward this year, we hope to do an online open enrollment experience with guided virtual tours for people who might not be comfortable with that change yet. We collaborated with the represented groups to secure memorandums of understanding to support modified shifts and other supports to maintain essential services during COVID-19. These include hazard pay for some positions, rotating shifts, and a policy for only one occupant per vehicle when appropriate. We completed the work associated with the 2017 Siegel Waters compensation study to ensure that employees are paid appropriately and competitively. We continued the successful recruitment and selection processes for key positions in a major shift to a virtual process for hiring. A lot of virtual interviews with that, and also looking internally for talent to give the excellent high-performing employees a chance to be promoted or transferred to a different location. And finally, we designed and prepared to launch the Grow 1000 program, and we were really the hub for that. Hundreds of young people were able to gain employment and valuable work experience through this program, and our city staff was able to manage that whole program throughout.
Good morning. Some highlights that we'd like to share with regards to facilities and workspaces is that we replaced the emergency backup power system for our police department headquarters and our emergency communications operations center. The city clerk's office has successfully established the election central center at the 21 Market Street facility to accommodate the new absentee ballot program. we completed a space utilization study of our facilities pre-COVID that will help us as we review and implement changes and things that we're going to learn through COVID that we can apply after post-COVID. We've implemented various changes in our facilities to promote hoteling opportunities and shared workspaces to help accommodate a more flexible work environment. We've also upgraded and enhanced our enterprise level solutions for facility security, including video cameras, card access systems, and a visitor management system. And we've also upgraded technology and collaboration equipment in all of our meeting rooms and conference rooms to support video conferencing and remote meeting opportunities.
Good morning. Some highlights from the area of technology, performance management, and internal communication. We successfully launched the digital workplace as part of COVID communications and the response plan. We successfully completed a citywide cybersecurity awareness training with 100% compliance. We presented performance management dashboards, commission prioritization workshops were hosted, a metric dashboard was created, and we launched the Invisio program. We've tracked key performance indicators within the public service group and engineering. The data governance playbook has been completed, and the open and smart city charter was drafted, and implementation has begun with community engagement in the MLK Park neighborhood. Software for the record, FTR, court video recording technology was implemented in 2 more courtrooms, and they implemented a new impound lot software.
The city has begun the process of scoping for the next master planning updates. We have begun with the implementation of the process with the recruitment of and retention of 20 citizen facilitators. They are leading neighborhood meetings to review the current master plan with their respective communities, as well as the any applicable area-specific plans. To support the facilitators, we did provide opportunities to attend the Citizen Planner program offered through Michigan State Extension. Also through, we offered and provided them with the opportunity to attend an equity foundations and also a facilitator training, which was especially critical given the switch from in-person to virtual meetings. We also are a stakeholder and engaged in the Rapids Transit-Oriented Development Study for South Division Avenue. We do anticipate having a robust land use plan that will accompany that study for to capitalize on the investment that's been made with the BRT. Also, in terms of housing policies and legislation, there was a number of items that were accomplished last fiscal year, including allowing the city of Grand Rapids to operate a land bank, allowing us to operate or more effectively use brownfield programs, and also working on legislation to raise the caps in the Brownfield Act.
Okay, so now switching to our second priority, which is economic prosperity and affordability. We have 4 metrics that you can see here that are included on the key metric dashboard. And as previously discussed, this is just a high-level overview of performance under each of the objectives, each of the 5.
Good morning. These key accomplishments are helping to support a resilient business environment in Grand Rapids. You authorized and we hired a new customer ombudsman who is enhancing customer service at the development center. Nearly 3/4 of development center business as measured by permit applications is now conducted electronically, and that is up significantly from under half a few years ago. All 4 inspection trades, building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing, are now scheduled through 311. That improves the experience for customers and increases our productivity. In partnership with the Office of Sustainability, we achieved Sol Smart Silver certification for improvements to our solar regulations and processes. And you adopted a crime prevention through environmental design, also known as CEPTED ordinance.
As it relates to business retention and growth for fiscal year 20, we were successfully able to get a little over $142 million of private investment commitment that is expected to create 518 jobs, retain 409, and create 26 housing units upon completion. Related to that, and we started a retail retention specialist program with DGRI and the Grand Rapids Chamber, and also implemented the use of technology in Salesforce to track our retention, expansion, and attraction activity for our office. We also updated our MLB policy to remove barriers in partnership with the Office of Equity and Engagement, and we've also conducted business expos with various partners to increase the MLB contractor registration process. We're also began the development of the framework for incorporating all inclusion plans for all tax incentive applications in our programs and evaluations. And related to that, launched the Equitable Grand River Restoration Initiative that has also provided an impact in increasing minority contractors. We've negotiated a purchase agreement for the Kent County Road Commission property as a potential replacement for 201 Market, and certainly we'll use the backfill of that for business retention and growth opportunities, and also opened up the medical cannabis, welcomed the medical cannabis industry to the community. As it relates to educational attainment and wage growth, we planned and executed the Grow 1000 Youth Employment Initiative that resulted in 350 summer placements. That was almost 10 times the usual placements through our community children's program. And the Grand Rapids Promise Zone were established, and its first students entered a cohort here in the fall. The T2C College Studios served 1,800 students, but more importantly, 82% of those students were persons of color. And we also worked with the Martin Luther King Neighborhood Association on the benefits agreement related to the Project One by Art Prize and the Quality of Life report.
So 2020 was a formative year for housing in Grand Rapids. We entered into a contract for housing practice leader services with Housing Next. And one of the primary projects that was undertaken was the housing needs assessment that was commissioned in partnership with the Fry Foundation, the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce. In all, 265 units were in various stages of development as of June 30th of 2020. A total of 411 housing units were issued permits during the year. 80 of those units were supported with economic development incentives during the fiscal year, including 26 low-income housing tax credit units that were supported with home and local brownfield revolving fund dollars. All that activity turned into a total of 675 units that were completed and ready for occupancy by the end of the fiscal year, which included 135 affordable rental units, 2 affordable homeowner units, and 538 market rate units. We also, during this time, adopted the South Division Corridor Plan as an amendment to the 2002 Master Plan.
Continuing to our work on making sure Grand Rapids becomes a destination city, we were able to secure corporate headquarters locations for Spectrum, Acrisure, and the Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building. The creation of social zones and social districts were created and expanded to expand the restaurant and entertainment capacities, of which we heard about earlier today. And the Office of Special Events worked with event organizers to adjust their programming related to COVID restrictions and pivot where possible, which really resulted in the creation of the Bridge event, which connected 33 distinct event planners to create 60 distinct events that are still going on today.
Now on to our third priority within the plan, which is engaged and connected community. 2 of the metrics on the dashboard come from the community survey that was done at the end of 2019. And you can see the high-level review of the 4 objectives that fall within the engaged and connected community section here.
The first item that we have, Doug Matthews, Assistant City Manager. First item that we have here is enhanced communications. We've worked to engage community members a little bit more on how they want to be communicated with so that we can adjust our strategies accordingly. Really worked on creating or shortening the distance between us and the community, especially on things like the Human Rights Ordinance.
We work to create and operationalize emergency communications protocols, which has been particularly important over the last 9 months, as we've all learned. Continue to leverage technology to be more proactive and effectively communicate. And that includes expanding our social footprint to include things like Nextdoor that give us a little bit more connectivity with the neighborhoods. We've looked to continue to find ways that we can leverage the website as a communications tool. We've done a great job of positioning the website for the provision of services, but want to make sure that we have a single landing point and portal for people to be able to get information about what it is that we're doing. Continuing to leverage our data to tell our story. You see some of that in the presentation today, and continue to partner with our innovation folks to find ways that we can not only push the data out publicly, but be able to frame that data so that folks understand the stories that are being told. Going back to the Human Rights Ordinance, and this is something that we're trying to do more of in general, is find partnerships with other agencies where it makes sense. So creating and implementing agreements with MDCR, the Fair Housing Center, and disability advocates to be able to really push the Human Rights Ordinance, front and center. And then last, really looking at how it is that we interact on a day-to-day basis with our community and enhancing our customer service training.
Thank you. For community engagement strength, some highlights. The SAFE Task Force released RFPs and awarded contracts to advance the important goals and outcomes within that report. Community engagement standard operating procedures were developed for parks capital projects that also centered equity. Extensive 2020 census outreach work was completed, including promotion at the Neighborhood Summit with neighborhood associations and several community-based organizations canvassing, and the incredible work and networks of the Complete Count Committee did excellent work. In addition, a census digital campaign at million views and generated at least 19,000 clicks to respond to the census. Everyone watching today, please, if you have not already, complete your census today, but no later than tomorrow, to bring much needed resources to the community. Also, live streaming of all City Commission, Committee of the Whole meetings and budget work sessions in both English and Spanish for greater access.
Mr. Matthews.
Sorry about that. We took a big step in terms of engaging and enhancing community perception this year by doing our first citywide community survey that we reported back out to the commission, and we're going to continue to use that information not just to report back out on our performance, but also to start having more intentional conversations in intervening years to zero in on specific actions that we can take to address some of the things that we learn. Parks and Recreation followed suit, surveying our participants to get a better picture of what our residents want, both in terms of facilities and in terms of programming, and what their satisfaction is. And the last is, I'd say, not just better leveraging media partnerships, but better engaging our media partnerships, as well as social media, and expanding into digital platforms, not just to tell our story, but also to solicit feedback from the community. And we're continuing to run some pilots in that space that are going to be able to guide our digital engagement strategy going forward.
For Objective 4, resident voice along with racial equity are the official values of the Grand Rapids Neighborhood Summit, and they guides the structure in that offering. So just before COVID, we were able to host over 500 stakeholders and community members this past March as well. Work began on preparing the regional 5-year housing and community development plan. And as Assistant City Manager Matthew stated, we launched digital online engagement platform, expand opportunity participation.
Okay, moving into our next area is health and environment. So we have 4 of our metrics included on the key metric dashboard. And within this particular priority, we have 5 objectives where you can see the overview here. And I'll kick us off with a quick overview of our first objective on reducing carbon emissions and enhancing climate resiliency. So we did complete a techno-economic analysis of installing solar on 8 of our city properties, including the Butterworth landfill. And we modeled how we could meet the 100% renewable energy goal. We were able to calculate that we have reduced our carbon footprint across our municipal operations by 29% when we compare 2019 to 2008, which exceeds the short-term goals for the Paris Climate Accord. We launched the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, also known as the C4, in partnership with many stakeholders from the community, where we are looking to work together to create an equitable climate change pilot. We launched a resident engagement campaign in partnership with the Urban Core Collective via our Zero Cities project to better understand residential needs and obstacles for home improvement and energy efficiency programs. I had the honor of being appointed to the governor's first Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice, and we passed environmental sustainability requirements in the cannabis licensing ordinance, and we also operationalized the forestry sustainability plan to ensure that the tree canopy is maintained and increased.
Good morning, David Marquar, Director of Grand Rapids Parks and Recreation, reporting on green space and recreation. With the hard work of department staff and committed community partners, the residents of Grand Rapids passed an evergreen millage for park maintenance and capital improvements. All of you on City Commission adopted 2019 millage investment guidelines, and the department has begun planning for implementation of this new evergreen millage. Additionally, the department began development of a park acquisition strategy, which includes the development of a decision criteria matrix and review of potential properties by the Parks Advisory Board. I think it's worth noting that these parcels that have been recommended for prioritization do in fact hold the potential to add 38 additional acres to the 3rd Ward and neighborhoods of focus. The department has also completed preliminary design and prepared to submit grant applications to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Department of Transportation for the development of the Leonard to Ann Riverfront Trail segment. Additionally, parks maintenance standard operating procedures have been established. This is a 400-page document that the department has prepared that will guide new millage use for operations purposes. Of course, implementation of these guidelines have been affected by the impacts of COVID. And then finally, the department has created River for All trail guidelines and river corridor implementation plans, both of which have been formally adopted by all of you as a part of the 2017 Parks Strategic Master Plan.
In terms of protecting and preserving water resources, we're on schedule for development of a PFAS minimization program at the Water Resources Recovery Facility. The new lead and copper rule and investment plan has been implemented, and the Water Department has created a local drinking water advisory council. The source water intake protection plan has been developed and is now under review by EGLE prior to implementation. The lead service line replacement program continues to make progress with replacement of 479 service lines during fiscal year 2020. We installed green infrastructure at Plaster Creek Family Park, Raspberry Field, and Richmond Park, and we're in the process of designing green infrastructure plans for Roberto Clemente Park, Garfield Park, and Ken O'Shea Park. Total stormwater infiltrated by the city stormwater projects now equals 2.1 million gallons per year. This is up from 727,000 gallons in 2019. Next slide, please. In terms of minimizing waste generation and promoting diversion, the materials management, operational, and financial assessment of all of our refuse, recycling, and yard waste streams is initiated and will be completed in the 4th quarter of 2020. The city received a recycling quality improvement grant from EGLE to seek ways to reduce contamination of recycling waste stream. Just to note that this effort is currently underway and we should be having some results here towards the end of November. The new compost facility was constructed and is scheduled to be in operation in the fall of 2020. The recycling participation rate by our residents was approximately 85%, and our diversion rate is approximately 20% at this time.
Under Objective 5, next slide, please. The Don't Play Around, reducing health disparities. The Don't Play Around with Lead digital marketing campaign launched in October of 2019 to increase awareness of lead paint hazard in and around the home and educate with strategies for preventing and reducing lead paint exposure and poisoning. The marketing campaign utilized targeted outreach in the 49507 zip code and produced an interactive web-based tool, resources, education, and guidance. This information is available at don'tplayaround.org. Following this, the Lead-Free Kids Grand Rapids Advisory Committee wrapped up their work and produced a final report with recommendations for legislative and policy changes to the City Commission in February of 2020. The city secured $5.5 million in grant funds for lead hazard control programs, including $1.3 million in MDHHS Lead Hazard Control Community Development or CHIP funds, and $4.2 million in HUD Lead Hazard Reduction grant funding. Finally, the Office of Government and Legislative Affairs has focused considerable effort on legislative advocacy at the state and federal level for COVID-19 response and recovery efforts, including securing CARES Act funding to support our community, businesses, and city operations. We're also continuing to provide support for safely re-engaging our economy with appropriate safety protocols and measures in place.
Okay, our fifth priority area is mobility. So you will see there are 3 metrics that are included on our key metric dashboard. There are 4 objectives within the mobility priority, and Mr. Nairmore will take us through them.
Thanks, Ms. Sutter. So in the area of infrastructure for mobility, multimodal transportation, the city added and improved just over 8 miles of bicycle facilities in implementing the Bicycle Action Plan. For pedestrian infrastructure, 600 curb ramps were upgraded, 51 miles were inspected and repaired for sidewalks, and just under a mile of a sidewalk extension filling a gap in the sidewalk network was completed. 22 transit shelters were installed in the first year of the program, with almost 70% of them in the neighborhoods of focus. And the second of 4 years of converting all of the city's pavement and crosswalk markings to durable pavement materials was completed. For 21st century mobility options, the city, in partnership with Kaizen Health and the Rapid for the Ford City of Tomorrow Challenge, launched Go Bus Plus pilot to improve accessibility of transport options for people with disabilities. Contracts were awarded for bike share and the scooter pilot, and the service of the scooters will start tomorrow on Wednesday, September 30th. In partnership with May Mobility for the autonomous shuttle and private partners, just over 67,000 rides were completed before service was disrupted due to COVID. And multiple departments coordinated with local agencies like the Rapid for deploying and developing and implementing the Laker line that launched in August. For parking, in December of 2019, the City Commission approved a downtown residential parking policy, and shortly thereafter, city staff implemented that, and spaces are still available for downtown residents to lease. An investor was secured for development of the Wedge property, and it was progressing until the development negotiations were paused due to COVID. And additionally, with the Studio C parking garage, the city is leasing 300 parking spaces that are added to the inventory, of which some of those spaces are still publicly available for lease. And lastly, with respect to the transportation network, the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Plan was completed. Phases 13 and 14 of the traffic signal optimization program were completed. And in terms of the Vital Street program, we are now up to 61% of good and fair for the condition of our streets through just under $15 million investment that improved 19 miles of city streets. The I-196 Division on-ramp connection was completed. And staff worked with community and a number of stakeholders on completing an analysis for converting Ottawa Street and Ionia Street from Fulton to Michigan Street from one-way to two-way. In the Noble neighborhood, in partnership with Grand Valley State University, the city awarded contracts for Hastings Connector and the Linear Park in the Noble neighborhood. And then lastly, we achieved a 95% customer satisfaction rate for the Vital Streets community engagement.
Okay, for our final priority area of safe community, you can see there are 3 metrics here on the city's key metric dashboard, but as you're familiar, there are more metrics on the police metric dashboard. There are 5 objectives within the safe community priority.
Good morning, Chief Lehman reporting on safe community key accomplishments. Under number 1, we have development of COVID-19 PPE guidelines for all city employees was accomplished. Conducted research and helped to facilitate the purchase of PPE to address the COVID-19 pandemic. The emergency manager coordinated resource requests for PPE with the Michigan State EOC. We continued ICS and NIMS training for all city employees, and we will continue our efforts to ensure compliance with National Incident Management System. The emergency manager obtained ICS Train the Trainer certification and is the first of 2 steps to become a formal ICS instructor.
Good morning, Brandon Davis from the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. I'll talk about emergency response. So all fire department operating apparatuses have been updated to standards of the Fleet Management Plan. Additionally, there was the formal establishment of the Homeless Outreach Team during the COVID-19 response. We also activated the Emergency Operations Center in response to a high wind event on September 11th of 2019, and activated the Emergency Operations Center in response to COVID-19's pandemic on March 13th, and continued in virtual activation through the fiscal year. Additionally, we activated the Emergency Operations Center to respond to the civil unrest and demonstrations in May and June.
And then for objective 3, which is over covering emergency recovery, we developed an after action report and improvement plan for the September 11th high wind event that occurred in 2019. We began developing an all hazards whole community emergency operations plan. We established the COVID-19 Resiliency and Recovery Work Group. And then we also developed a after action report and improvement plan for the civil unrest and demonstration incidents that occurred in May and June of this year. And then also developed an after action report and improvement plan for the first quarter response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Grand Rapids Police Department Community Engagement Unit coordinated or attended approximately 260 community engagement events during fiscal year 20. Prior to the COVID-19 disruption, this was on pace to exceed the previous fiscal year. Chief Eric Payne was hired as the Chief of Police and promised to lead the agency with an eye towards equity and trust. The city created and launched the Office of Public Accountability. OPA's webpage and social media platform were also launched to increase communication with the community and elevate resident voice in public safety operations. The OPA worked with other city departments to create True Action Reimagining Police Reform webpage. On June 5th, an update was given to the public on policing in Grand Rapids. The city announced operational changes to improve policing and hosted a digital town hall on policing in Grand Rapids. OPA and the Office of Equity and Engagement launched a 4-part Healing Tensions training with staff in partnership with the National Equity Project.
Objective 5 supports efforts to ensure all residents have safe, stable, and permanent housing. Strategies in this area focus on addressing issues of homelessness, health and safety, and keeping people in their homes. During the 4th quarter of fiscal year 20, the Homelessness Outreach Team was deployed to ensure health and safety of our homeless and unsheltered residents. In partnership with nonprofit service providers, a total of 224 households obtained housing or were diverted from homelessness. With the help of our neighborhood organizations, proactive outreach occurred with property owners who had nuisance or exterior housing code violations. 50% of those were resolved through self-compliance and did not require code enforcement action. Through these same partnerships, nearly 3,000 residents received personal or property safety trainings. 83 homes were improved through the city's housing rehabilitation programs. Health and safety repairs were made in all of them, with 47 homes also receiving remediation of lead-based paint hazards. In spite of service disruption in the third and fourth quarters of fiscal year 20, the Code Compliance Department proactively certified nearly 92% of all occupied rental dwellings. And finally, the city received an additional $3 million in emergency solutions grants funds to address and prevent homelessness related to COVID-19.
Okay, so I know we have another important presentation, so I'll ask for the remainder of our presentation if staff can help move quickly through this, but do want to highlight some of the accomplishments that have been made via our values that we have. So I'll start off with accountability, and these are accomplishments that are identified in other areas of the plan, but merit mentioning again here just to really show how we are living by these values. So with respect to accountability, you've heard about the establishment of our Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. In terms of our performance management work, with the multitude of reports and presentations and workshops that we've deployed over fiscal year 20. We did create a performance-based initial budget and then revised it twice due to COVID, which resulted in a $23 million budget reduction from the previous year. Of course, passed the legislative priority agenda. Our comptroller team created a new report for our fiscal committee, finalized the Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Plan. Of course, you just heard, announced and began implementing the police reform commitments, and formally documented a parks maintenance plan.
Under our value of collaboration, we implemented the Retail Specialist Program with DGRI and the Grand Rapids Chamber, completed the Housing Needs Assessment with Housing Next, the Chamber, and the Fry Foundation, also launched the Master Plan Scoping with several community partners. Several offices came together on the new revised budget process that I explained earlier. We also hosted the 6th annual Grand Rapids Neighborhood Summit, which is a huge lift for many people in the community, and we thank them, and hosted the Task Force on Elected Representation.
Good morning, Becky Jo Glover, Chief Customer Service and Innovation Officer. Had an exciting years, and under the customer service, our key accomplishments were: we maintained city services through the COVID-19 pandemic. We operated the Emergency Operations Center during the windstorm, COVID-19, and civil unrest. We expanded language access and began offering Spanish for commission meetings that was both for interpretation as well as closed captioning. We created the program Above Customer Expectation, also known as ACE, awards for our program for our staff to be recognized for the great work they're doing. We renovated city facilities to offer all gender restrooms, nursing room, and signage in Spanish. We launched the Organizational Development Program to serve staff and implement new employee benefits such as parental leave, sick leave, bereavement, telework, and parking incentive. We installed and increased the ease of use installing our small-scale solar. We enhanced awareness of the Principal Residence Exemption Program. We partnered on the inaugural Our Prize Project One project. We launched the Digital Workplace Intranet solution to assist with employees being able to access information quickly. And we improved the transit stops. These are just a few of the key accomplishments for customer service.
We also transitioned the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to become the Office of Equity and Engagement. We established 3 employee resource groups. We hosted a 2-hour training called Equity Foundations for all staff, Healing Tensions, as well as LGBTQI awareness training in partnership with GVSU. We adopted the Human Rights Ordinance, there's a typo, designed in partnership with community and expungement symposium, implemented over $500,000 in Third Ward Equity Fund projects, contracted with local organizations to fund business training and resource delivery underserved entrepreneurs. We increased MLBE registrations by 70% last year and awarded more than $15 million in engineering contract MLBEs. We approved more than $14 million in FY 2021 operating projects that advance equity. We created equity evaluation process for the economic development investments and contracts, and launched the Equitable Grand River Initiative and secured the full-time equity analysis, prepared the Regional 5-Year Consolidated Housing and Community Development Plan, and implemented the Indigent Defense Rules.
For innovation, as we did things differently this year, our key accomplishments include: we passed a cannabis license ordinance that includes environmental sustainability requirements and with the social equity policy plan. We partnered with Michigan State University, MSU, on PFAS destruction technology. 3 of our staff became National Green Infrastructure Certified Practitioners. The created program of Homeless Outreach Team during COVID-19, also known as HUT, was created. We piloted a sidewalk snowplow removal program, and we launched the Community Collaboration on the Climate Change C4, where our community will create and exchange and help us put that agenda together on the program. And we created social zones.
Okay, so for our last value is sustainability. We reduced fossil fuel consumption and utility costs. As mentioned before, operationalized the Forestry Sustainability Plan, implemented the Residential Engagement Program in partnership with the Urban Core Collective that really focuses on affordability, health, energy, and carbon. We passed a $530 million fiscal year 21 budget that is based on financial sustainability, environmental protection, and equity. We kicked off an employee wellness program that highlights financial, mental, and environmental health, prioritized lead paint remediation work, and Thrive Outside recreational offerings. We continued the lead service line replacements and vital streets investments, and all of those have very beneficial health outcomes associated with them, piloting the May Mobility shuttle, investing in the River for All, and passing the Parks millage. So just as a wrap up and closing, some of the next steps that we have are that we will be hosting a staff leadership retreat. Staff will continue to work on prioritization and implementation of our strategic plan. As you know, on October 30th, we'll be hosting a workshop with you where our CFO, Ms. Claren, will review our financials, and we'll have a discussion around reprioritization for this fiscal year, as well as prioritization for fiscal year 22. On December 15th, City Manager Washington will propose any mid-year budget amendments as warranted. And then a few dates for next year. We'll come back in February to do a mid-year performance management update. In April, we'll kick off. The city manager will kick off by presenting the fiscal year 22 preliminary fiscal plan and coming back to you in May requesting approval of that fiscal plan. So for purposes of wrapping up, I just really wanted to say that I'm really proud of our staff's commitment to measuring performance under the plan and the accomplishments that we've been able to achieve collectively. While there is much work still to be done, I hope that this report helps demonstrate the work that we are doing to be more strategic, transparent, and accountable with respect to the desired outcomes established in our strategic plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to City Manager Washington.
Thank you, Ms. Sutter, and thank you to all who presented and people who were responsible for the work. You truly aced it. You went above my expectations and many others, so I appreciate it. And Mayor, what we'll do is we'll pause to see if there are questions about anything that has been presented, but to remind the commission, this is foundational for you and the public, particularly as you go through the detailed reports in those areas that were significantly disrupted. There's a link to those specific parts of the red diagram by each area and objective, and we look forward to talking more about those areas where we've had disruption in our prioritization conversation that's upcoming.
Thank you, City Manager. I'll make a couple comments. I don't have any questions, and I'll turn it over to see if my colleagues have any questions or comments. One, I want to say thank you for this update. I don't know about my colleagues, but I find it really rewarding to listen to this update that really takes the strategic plan that we all created together and shows how it's being operationalized and implemented throughout the organization and in our community. So I know a lot of work has gone into this. We have an incredible team, and here we are in the midst of a pandemic, yet we're still moving forward with a number of our goals. So thank you, City Manager, but thank you to the entire team and to everyone who presented this morning. This is really good information, and I do believe it provides a good foundation for all of us as we go into our October 30 workshop. So with that, I'll see if my colleagues have any questions. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Moody, was that a thumbs up? Okay. Commissioner Jones?
No, I just want to also commend City Manager Washington and staff. Very thorough, a great reminder of what has been accomplished And also, I think it provides for a great opportunity to, I think, operate with better foresight because we have been able to, again, see from whence we've come. And even in the midst of pandemics, just is, again, a very, very uplifting, very optimistic. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well said, Commissioner. All right, so commissioners, you have a much more detailed document that goes into more information. So as you have time to read through that, if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to the city manager or city staff to ask for additional information. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to our next presentation, which is another important presentation, not just for this body, but for our entire community. And so I'll start off with our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said previously, 2020 has been challenging for a variety of issues, specifically those not only around the pandemic where there's been health disparities, but also the attention that has come to our community and organization around social injustices and through many of the demonstrations nationwide. We did not see the convergence of these events coming over the past few months, but what has become apparent to us is that this is yet another opportunity, like so many others that we've talked about, to become better and to innovate. And so when I became manager here, I promised to serve this organization and community to the best of my ability and to tackle the tough challenges and give my best professional advice and recommendations to you as a governing body and direction to the staff, even if it's not the most popular or politically palatable, when helping you in this community navigate through these tough issues. The problems that we've discovered with systemic racism have been here since the founding of our country, and we all must have the courage to stand up and speak to them, particularly for those who have no voice. And throughout this tragedy, the series of tragedies that have gripped our country, whether it is through George Floyd's murder or Breonna Taylor's murder or the many other instances that continue to come up in other communities, we do believe that this is an inflection point and something good can happen, something innovative can happen, and that is what I believe you will continue to see in the police department's unveiling of their strategic plan, and something that will be meaningful and will be lasting in its impact in terms of change. Our officers have continued to work around the clock, sometimes 24-hour shifts, sometimes working 10 to 14 days a week, 10, 14 days in a row. And at the same time, we know it's tough doing that because there's a national conversation around law enforcement being scrutinized both locally as well as nationally. And I want to thank them for continuing to do their job in the midst of criticism of the industry and the profession, and continue to uphold the standards in this community for in many cases where it's not being done in other places. I won't continue with my preliminary remarks with one exception. I do want to say regarding the issues around the fiscal implications of the plan. And I think that the narrative I mentioned earlier that, you know, when you're operating in a pandemic and in a crisis, there are many buttons to push, and you got to determine which ones to manage, navigate. And the cry for a lot of people has been this one button, to defund the police department. And there are many other things that we have to do to improve policing in our community and trust and transparency. But I wanted to reflect on that or revisit that and just remind the community we are evaluating the fiscal impact of any changes that we make and what will make our community better. But those discussions, I appreciate the commission's deliberative approach in allowing us to have time to think through that. But in the midst of what we've done, with the reductions in the budget, with the almost $1.5 million that has been reduced, the narrative around the percentage of the police department's general operating fund spend has really changed, where it was almost 39%. It's now, based on the amended budget, at 37.4%. There are also discussions that we're having right now as we continue to look at our a prioritization of how we might increase our investment from $75,000 to evidence-based crime prevention program to something significantly more. But not only us, but other stakeholders in the community. The other question has been asked around the police department strategic plan. Is this going to be something that is going to require a significant more amount of investment? And I will preview for you that of the many action steps that have been highlighted, that will be highlighted in the plan, 90% of what is in the strategic plan in the police department can be done and repurposed and implemented within the existing department's budget. Let me say that again. 90% of their plan can be done within the existing department's budget. When we adopted our strategic plan, I could not tell you that. I couldn't tell you over the next 4 years what we could do with the existing budget because we knew that it required resources. But for the department to take this time to reimagine policing within their current budget, to make the changes that they've done, and for it to require, to allow 90% of the plan to be implemented with the existing resources is phenomenal. The other 10%, as you'll hear, will be things like cure violence or the technology enhancements that will eventually require some fiscal determination as we prioritize investments in future year budgets. So again, I want to thank the department for being very thoughtful and strategic in the development of this plan. I want to thank the public and the community for their input, and the many other city departments who've partnered with it. Especially, you'll hear from our outside consultant that's worked with us, our CEO from the public sector search and consulting firm, Gary Peterson, for his work, as well as you and your patience. So with that, I will turn it over to our police chief, who again, I want to thank him for his leadership in these very difficult times. I'm sure when he took office, he had no idea the challenges that this community will be facing, but I do believe that he is the right person in the right place to help us navigate through these challenges. So with that, Chief Payne.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, City Manager, for those opening comments. And to the Mayor and Commission, thank you for this opportunity to come before you today. For the past several months, cities across the U.S. have been challenged with addressing their community's grief, rage, and frustrations. From the murder of George Floyd and the tragic death of Breonna Taylor to the civil unrest in many cities, our nation finds itself at a pivotal point in history, as do we in Grand Rapids. From the very beginning of law enforcement existence, it has been understood that the community should determine how it police. I wholeheartedly believe this and am committed to making sure this is the Grand Rapids way. And in response to our community members who have exercised their right to speak up about justice, reform, and change, I'm here to say, as I have for several months, I hear you. But I know it's not enough to say I hear you. Actions always speak louder than words. I'm here today to present to you our police department's strategic operational plan for 2021 to 2023. But before we can talk about what's next for our police department and how we can continue to work together to move forward as a community, we must acknowledge and understand where we have been and where we are today. Law enforcement as a profession has a long history of service and sacrifice, but it's not without mistakes and shortcomings, including playing a significant role in systematic racism. In our many listening sessions over the past several years, I have heard from members of our community, particularly people of color, that have felt over-policed, harassed, and afraid. As a member of the police department for more than 30 years, hearing these personal stories has a profound impact on me, both professionally and personally. I want to assure the community that those outcomes were never the intent of our department. They were the result of outdated tactics and ineffective deployment strategies. It has been said during recent city commission meetings that the police response to violent crime is to throw more cops at it. Yes, this has been our response. In fact, this historically has been the response of police departments across the country. When police departments see a significant increase in violent crime, the traditional response has been to send more officers and specialty teams to engage with aggressive enforcement. But where has that gotten us? If we send in additional officers and tell our officers to go stop crime, they will use tactics that have proven to work. They will make traffic stops, engage residents, and identify and arrest people who have committed crimes. Oftentimes, we are able to impact crime, but do we also impact innocent people? As we cast a wide net, who else get caught up in it? We know that some community members have been stopped and feel like they have been targeted, and we acknowledge that there is a better way to police. After a recent increase in violent crime, I have already enacted the strategies from this plan to hotspot neighborhoods around the city. Over 3 nights, approximately 35 officers conducted proactive engagement efforts, strategic enforcement, which resulted in 155 positive non-enforcement contacts, 34 arrests, and 10 illegal firearms taken off the streets. Just as importantly, our officers conducted themselves with professionalism, and respect, netting 0 internal affairs complaints. We believe in constitutional policing. We know you don't want a police department that pulls over a single mother for a tail light out, or a father driving to work who has chose between groceries for his family and getting his license renewed. As a police officer, I know a tail light that's out and driving without a valid license are clear violations of the law. But as police chief, I acknowledge these low-level offenses are not a priority. And I have heard from community that they want us instead to focus our attention on reducing violent crime and building trust. So our challenge in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and others during a public health pandemic is to reimagine how we police our community. I have taken in and thought long and hard about comments and concerns I've heard from the community. I have reviewed the recommendations from many studies on how we police and have asked for extensive feedback from our original draft. Before I talk about our strategic plan, I want you to know that as part of our planning process, we revised our vision, mission, and values. Everything in the plans flows through my vision for the department, which acknowledges from the outset that we are in this together. My vision is that in partnership with our community, we will become the safest sized city and most trusted police department in the United States. That means in partnership with our community, we will no longer police our community how we think it should be policed. Rather, we will work with our community as it's told us is to be policed. Our mission is to protect life and property, prevent crime, and ensure all people feel safe and are safe at all times in the community. We have developed a plan that will change how policing is done in Grand Rapids. Our new way of policing will foster a culture of service, one of our stated values. We also will have the importance of equity in our stated values that will acknowledge right now. I will acknowledge right now that historically, segments of our community, including people of color, low-income residents, and others, have been disproportionately impacted by policing practices and the criminal justice system. As a leader of the department now, I acknowledge this, and I want to say to community members who have been negatively impacted or treated unfairly by police, and that includes me, I am sorry. I want you to know we are committed to providing fair and police services for all individuals with integrity, another of our stated values. And when we make mistakes, we will take responsibility for actions and be transparent and accountable. Transitioning to a policing model that requires us to engage and collaborate with community members, advocacy groups, other city departments, civilian service providers, while situations that might require police presence. I feel strongly our plan provides our personnel the necessary framework to nurture a culture of service, not only today, but for years to come. This transition will be successful only if we come together as a community, listen to one another, and work together. As we continue to develop this plan and implement it, we will engage our community in an ongoing dialogue with the goal of improving the services we provide. Our process for drafting the plan was very inclusive of city personnel, national experts, and input from the community over the past several years. It is important to note that we are experiencing an increase in violence throughout our community. This is not, but it's vital for a community and GRPD to work together to end this cycle of violence. Building trust is a major component in working with the community. We need to continue to work with mutual respect and mutual trust between the community and GRPD. We have already seen success with this goal when engaged with the community and strategically addressing offenders after recent increase in gun violence. It is my goal to continue these efforts through this plan. I recognize having a safest mid-sized city and the most trusted police department is a bold statement. I am committed that by working with every stakeholder and community, GRPD and its leadership, we can accomplish the vision. I would like to introduce Gary Peterson, to give his national perspective. Gary is a 26-year veteran of public service and a nationally recognized expert in the area of improving traditional police chief search process. Gary?
Chief Payne, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Mayor Bliss, members of the commission, City Manager Washington, appreciate the opportunity to provide my perspective and a national perspective on the current status of policing in America. For those of you who do not know me, I'm also a retired police chief, and the focus of my practice has been executive search and then secondarily helping cities operationalize 21st century policing principles and practices. In both areas, I've had the opportunity to listen and hear the constituencies in different communities across the country and observe and consult on ways to improve outcomes. As some might imagine, we've found that in many communities, they're experiencing similar issues, crime issues, a lack of trust in the police, and at the same time, the overwhelming desire of a lot of communities to have more community engagement from the police. All people want to feel safe and be safe at all times. With that as the backdrop, since the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis, there's been a national awakening over systemic racism, as the chief alluded to, and as City Manager Washington stated in his comments. Some cities have initiated cuts to police funding as a response to their community's grievances with police tactics and the criminal justice system. As we all know, there is also a worldwide pandemic that has decimated our country and the world, and in particularly some of our municipal budgets, I mean, frankly. In fact, 13 major cities in the US have cut funding or decreased staffing to the police department and have eliminated or moved some traditional services to other city departments. This is called decoupling. This has been done very quickly in some cases with little planning. In Austin, Texas, the city council voted to cut $150 million from the police budget, mainly through decoupling 911 services, forensics, internal affairs, and special events. Basically, they moved budget monies to other departments and either delayed or froze vacant positions. In the Los Angeles Police Department, they cut $150 million from a $1.86 billion budget, which is roughly 8% reduction. The cuts were related to attrition, freezing positions, and delaying capital projects, and then funding some much needed programs. In Seattle, after the CHOP zone or autonomous zone incidents where 2 individuals were killed in areas that were made inaccessible to public safety, defunding efforts were watered down from a proposed $100 million to $3.5 million, which included cuts to the police chief's salary, which resulted in her resignation. Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, a 28-year veteran of the department, a staunch reform advocate, and the first African-American leader in the department. Other cities have proposed or made smaller cuts. Some of these cities, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Portland, Philadelphia, Hartford, Connecticut, Norman, Oklahoma, and others. At a time where many cities are experiencing an increase in violent crime, and I know, as the chief said, Grand Rapids is not immune to this phenomenon. Not all cities are responding with budget cuts. Other cities are looking at these issues differently and proposing alternative solutions. Because of the increase of crime, cities have moved to increase police funding in some areas, investing in programming that helps their police improve their relationship with the community. Those cities include Houston, San Diego, California, Durham, North Carolina, and Nashville. Most police experts that I talk to don't believe the defunding or decoupling services will likely transform policing across America instantaneously. Most acknowledge that the hard work really revolves around complex interactions that we call the police-community relationship. Here in Grand Rapids, I've had several discussions with Chief Payne and City Manager Washington about the desire to improve the department's relationship with all segments of the community, especially communities of color. Today, Chief Payne said, we're going to police the community like the community wants to be policed. This is a philosophical change that's operationalized in the city's, in the department's strategic plan. I've been involved in planning discussions with the strategic planning team, and they've been squarely focused on developing a plan that addresses this relationship and crime issues. The plan calls for implementing strategies that seek to change the relationship between the police and the community. In my professional opinion, this is the best path forward to build trust with the community and increase the overall safety for the residents. Grand Rapids PD has taken a more thoughtful and measured approach. They have worked hard at listening to stakeholders, poring over past studies, and assessing how to reimagine policing. And it starts with the police-community relationship. And I really appreciate the opportunity to offer my insight. Thank you very much, and I'll yield back to Chief Payne.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay. As you can see, this is our strategic plan for FY 2021 to 2023. Our agenda for today is to review the process for drafting our plan, discussing the feedback we received and incorporating it into this final version, review the key plan components and significant revision, discuss the implementation framework, updates on police metric dashboard, and close with any questions you may have. Take note that the final plan and all supporting information can be found on the city's website at grandrapids.gov/GRPD strategic plan. Before I move on, I would like to thank all those in the city that have helped develop our plan, but specifically, I'd like to thank Allison Sutter, the city's Sustainability and Performance Management Officer, who helped guide us through the process, and Michael Moore, the city's graphic illustrator, for all his work in the design portion of the plan, including many of the graphics you will see in our presentation, and also City Manager Washington, who allowed us to collaborate with other departments and work on this project. Here you see the transformation timeline going all the way back to the original 12-point plan in 2015. We've included accomplishments, feedback, significant events, and pivotal moments not only in Grand Rapids, but around the country. The strategic plan was a significant undertaking, and it was not developed in a vacuum. Here you can see the stakeholders and sources of input that range from community leaders, city personnel, the labor unions, and neighborhood association. It was our intent to make sure every voice was heard and acknowledged. Our process for developing the plan was very intentional and elaborate. We collaborated with many city departments, met weekly with the city manager and executive team, included outside experts, engaged with agency personnel, sought input from community members through such groups as the Police Chiefs Advisory Team, incorporated recommendations from the many reports we had available, and arguably the most importantly, utilized community feedback from the many sessions we have facilitated. From the Safe Task Force Focus Group in 2015 to the town halls and commission meetings, we presented the initial draft and asked for feedback. We believe, based on our analysis of that feedback, that these 41 items from 5 categories across 6 years are a priority for our community. It is important to me that the community know we hear you. Although we'd like to think we can't do everything, at least not right away. Therefore, we have prioritized the previous list of 41 items and intentionally embedded them into our plan. For example, we will partner with crisis intervention, mental health, housing, and healthcare specialists to decrease the number of calls for service for our patrol officers working in neighborhoods. We acknowledge implicit bias and will continue to train annually on this concept. We will invest in crime prevention and reduce violent acts. To ensure we are held accountable, we have cited where in our plan these priorities are addressed. Among the feedback we received after our initial presentation were public comments at commission meeting on August 11th, a digital town hall I held on August 17th, the electronic surveys from the community, meeting with stakeholders such as Link Up, UCC, and the NAACP, as well as input from my advisory team, department personnel, and city leadership. After reviewing all the feedback, we added 1 new strategy under engagement and 39 action steps to provide clarity and more detail. We are very thankful to those who provided input, so this is truly a plan built in partnership. A large part of the plan was to rewrite and recommit to our values, vision, and mission. We will make decisions based on our values of service, equity, integrity, and accountability. Service, through compassion, empathy, and courage, we are driven to meet the public safety needs of our community. Equity, we acknowledge that historically segments of our community, including people of color, low-income residents, and others, have been disproportionately impacted by city policies, policing practices, and criminal justice system. We are committed to providing fair and just service for all individuals. I'll note that we added city policies to the values to help emphasize that it's larger than just a police and criminal justice system issue. Integrity, we will do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Accountability, we are committed to transparency and will always take responsibility for our actions. Our vision, or what we aspire to achieve, is through partnership with our community, we will become the safest mid-sized city and most trusted department in the United States. Our mission ties nicely into the city's strategic plan, stating that we protect life and property, prevent crime, and ensure all people feel safe and are safe at all times throughout our community. I will now turn the presentation over to Deputy Chief David Kittle to discuss specifics of our strategic plan.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon. Our plan is broken down by priorities, objectives, strategies, and action steps. Priorities are our main buckets, if you will, to which we organize our work, while outcomes describe what we hope to accomplish within each of our priorities. Objectives identify where we will focus our efforts under each of the higher level priorities. Strategies identify how we will achieve our objectives and desired outcomes. Action steps are the tasks required to execute the strategy, while metrics are how we will measure how well we are achieving our objectives and desired outcomes. Since the release of our draft plan, we have honed many of our metrics, making them more quantitative and measurable. For this presentation, we'll only go as deep as the strategy level in the interest of time, but you can see all of our action steps in the actual plan. You'll note that many of our changes from the draft plan are highlighted in green text on our slides in this presentation, but a red line version of the plan illustrating all of our changes is available on our website, along with all the feedback we've received. We've identified 3 interwoven priorities to drive our department for the next 3 years. Those priorities are safety, innovation, and engagement. Our approach to each of these priorities will be informed by best practices, dialogue with our community, and a commitment to continuous evaluation and improvement. Our objectives and strategies are formed by previous studies and engagement within the community over the past several years. Our first priority is safety, and our desired outcome is to provide professional neighborhood policing services to prevent crime, enhance trust, and ensure safety for all. Our first objective is to be a positive presence in our neighborhoods, respond to police calls for service, and engage in collaborative problem-solving initiatives with our community. Strategy 1 under this objective is to transition to neighborhood-based policing by making every patrol officer a community policing specialist who will focus on crime prevention, improve the quality of life for our community members, and build trust. Our first task will be to examine our current service area and beat configuration to determine if it is the most appropriate structure for our new neighborhood-based policing philosophy. In our current beat structure, this strategy increases our community policing specialists from 15, covering 6 days per week and only partial times of the day, to 132 community policing specialists working 24/7. Residents and businesses will know who their beat officers are, and officers' primary objective will be successful outcomes and solutions through problem solving. Our second strategy, which is key to the success of Strategy 1, is to increase officers' unallocated time so they can actively engage in their neighborhood. This will involve a significant task of evaluating our call management protocols to ensure officers are only sent to calls that require sworn personnel. Additionally, to the extent possible, we'll ensure that beat officers handle all non-emergency calls for service in their area for familiarity and accountability purposes. Strategy 3 is to maximize the use of data to provide timely and accurate intelligence. This will ensure analysts are presenting beat-level intelligence and crime data to beat officers regularly. Additionally, it will ensure beat officers are working on identified problems that are complaint-driven. Our second objective under safety is to create a crime reduction team. This team will have 2 primary objectives. First is to assist beat officers in concentrated areas of criminal activity. This is called hotspot policing, and you'll note that our plan calls for beat officers to communicate with their neighborhoods prior to the deployment of proactive strategies that may increase police presence. The intent of this type of policing is not to throw a large net over an area, but to strategically address the specific problem. The team's second objective will be to focus on arresting serious criminal offenders identified by investigators. Objective 3 is to engage with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and community stakeholders to pursue data-driven, evidence-based strategies that address root causes of police-related emergencies. Our first strategy is to identify funding for a collaborative approach that integrates community leaders, past offenders, and officers in violence reduction strategies, such as Cure Violence or similar program. Strategy 2 is about partnering with the SAFE Task Force to explore implementing police-related recommendations, such as a gun buyback program, for which planning is already underway. Funding of $20,000 has been allocated, and the buyback will occur in the last 2 weeks of October. Our second priority is innovation, where we will leverage partnerships and technology to improve services, decrease crime, and increase efficiency. Objective 1 is to explore alternative responses to certain calls for service. Our first strategy is to expand the Homelessness Outreach team that was formed a few months ago in partnership with the fire department. We've already expanded the number of police officers assigned, and the city has contracted with Network 180 to integrate permanent behavioral health professionals into the team. We will use Strategy 1 as a model for our second strategy, which is to develop and pilot a mental and behavioral health team that can co-respond to mental health, non-violent substance use, and other related calls for service. This will involve identifying the necessary components of the team and determining the appropriate types of calls they will respond to. Strategy 3 is a similar concept and calls for developing a community assistance team made up of non-sworn personnel who can assist and work with beat officers to address neighborhood concerns that are non-criminal and more in line with quality of life issues. Examples might include neighbor issues, noise complaints, and similar types of calls where police officers may not be required. Finally, we will collaborate with Mobile GR to transition parking enforcement to non-sworn city employees outside of the police department, thereby increasing the time officers have to deal with more serious offenses and engaging in the neighborhoods. Our second objective under innovation is to partner with the Kent County Prosecutor's Office to coordinate victim advocacy and restorative justice programs. Our newly hired victim advocate is well positioned to ensure we play a vital role in these important programs. Objective 3 is to leverage technological opportunities to decrease crime and increase efficiency while ensuring objective and constitutional use and accountability. We will continue to evaluate the constitutional use of unmanned aerial systems as first responder, a program where UASs are deployed to provide intelligence to responding officers. In a model program, the UAS as first responder was able to cancel responding officers in nearly 25% of its deployments, increasing the efficiency of the department. With community support, we will revisit the effectiveness of gunfire detection technology, as we are currently experiencing a significant increase in gunfire and violence across our city. A real-time crime center consolidates technology and data to give officers instant information to improve their response to incidents, as well as guide resource deployment. Community engagement and education would be first steps prior to implementation to any of these technological enhancements that would allow us to respond to crime events more efficiently, more deliberately, with improved operational intelligence, and with a proactive emphasis on officer, citizen, and community safety. Our third priority of engagement will build community trust and mutual understanding by enhancing community engagement strategies within the framework of our neighborhood-based policing. Objective 1 is simply to align our engagement with our neighborhood-based policing philosophy by taking it to the neighborhood level. For the first strategy here, we will enhance communication with residents, businesses, and visitors, utilizing multiple mediums for two-way communication, including regularly scheduled neighborhood meetings and events, social and traditional media, and websites or apps. Additionally, we will measure and analyze which forms of communication are most effective for the community. In strategy 2, we will better educate the community and city leadership on police operations. We will reimagine the citizen and youth police academies while collaborating with community stakeholders on educational videos and other opportunities, such as a Know Your Rights campaign. For strategy 3, we'll ensure equitable engagement representation throughout the city by creating equity-centered training for community engagement while mapping and publishing our engagement efforts. As part of this strategy, we'll also strive to ensure participants in the Police Chiefs Advisory Team, the Youth Advisory Board, the Citizens Police Academy, and the Youth Police Academy, along with other similar groups associated with the police department, reflect the demographics of the city. In Objective 2, we will partner and collaborate with the Offices of Oversight and Public Accountability and Equity and Engagement, as well as with community stakeholders to increase community trust through transparency and accountability while elevating the community's voice in police operations. Our first strategy, to provide accurate and timely data to the city's police metrics dashboard, is already in place, but will be a work in progress. We received a lot of feedback on the metrics and as a result added an action step under this strategy to ensure that we continue to identify additional data for the dashboard that the community would like to see moving forward. Strategy 2 will hold our commanders accountable to utilize data regarding community sentiment through community surveys to constantly evaluate and improve police services while ensuring equity. Strategy 3 is newly added and is to develop a formal performance management strategy to ensure progress on our plan is measured and performance is reported publicly. This includes an action step formulated from one of our studies and suggested during one of our feedback sessions, which is to explore implementation of a continuous improvement approach to policing that identifies objectives and key results for units under operations and ensures shared responsibility for success, particularly around community engagement and community policing. Strategy 4 will add a formal advisory structure to the Police Chiefs Advisory Team, providing input on items such as budget, policy, performance metrics, and outcomes. The team currently meets every other week and has provided feedback on the strategic plan throughout its development. In Strategy 5, we will reimagine the Police Chiefs Youth Advisory Board by partnering with local schools and make it more meaningful to both our city's youth as well as the police department. The focus of Objective 3 is to attract, hire, and retain high-performing employees who embrace the guardian mentality and our new neighborhood-based policing philosophy. In Strategy 1, we will continue to reimagine recruiting strategies with the goal of ensuring the demographics of departmental staff represent the community's demographics. We've already initiated a diverse committee of department members to provide guidance and recruitment methods, and will collaborate with organizations such as the NAACP, Hispanic Center, Urban League, Link Up, and Urban Core Collective, among other local organizations, on recruiting strategies. Strategy 2 will hold our beat officers accountable for recruiting at the neighborhood level, including in neighborhoods of focus as part of our existing Grow Our Own strategy. For Strategy 3, we will foster a guardian culture and ensure that an impartial policing philosophy is valued throughout our organization, including in our dispatch center. We will provide training that educates sworn personnel in the importance of a guardian mindset while preparing them to be warriors only when absolutely necessary. That concludes our high-level summary of our strategic plan, and as noted earlier, we invite you to take a look at the entire report to review our numerous action steps that will guide our execution of this 3-year organizational blueprint. I will now turn it over to Deputy Chief Reichenberg, who will discuss the implementation framework, among other updates.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Bill. The Police Department and the Office of Customer Service and Innovation have created a publicly available police metrics dashboard. We have assigned police personnel as objective leads on the strategic plan and will hold them accountable for reporting on and achieving the desired outcomes within the plan objectives. We have identified a start and end date for every action step in the plan. This was done using the fiscal years associated with the plan. We are currently working with the Human Resources Department and are in the process of hiring a civilian public information officer and director of administrative services. We will be utilizing a software application to collect qualitative progress updates and calculate how effectively we are implementing each action step and whether we are meeting identified deadlines. We have set up quarterly reporting system for the strategic plan so that we can report out to the city leadership on the progress of the police department's strategic plan. We will continue to engage with stakeholders on the content of the plan, as well as the implementation framework. Some of these organizations include Link Up, Urban Core Collective, and the NAACP of Greater Grand Rapids. We have begun implementing the plan within the existing budget for fiscal year 2021 and will submit our future budget requests, aligning all requests to this strategic plan. We will share all of our performance reports publicly on our website. This plan will continue to evolve and will be updated as needed. We will explore integrating performance measures from the plan into all staff evaluations. In total, there are 101 action steps to the strategic plan. 89 of the action steps start in fiscal year 2021. 35 of the action steps are completed in fiscal year 2021. This information is publicly available on our police strategic plan website. We will update this framework quarterly during performance management presentations to be transparent about the police department's progress. On June 10th, City Manager Washington directed the police department to work on implementing 7 specific items related to the use of force and officer identification within 60 days. The following changes have been drafted and are in the process of implementation. As of September 28th, the police department has draft language for all 7 items. The city attorney's office assisted with drafting of the proposed changes. These changes have been presented to the community stakeholders, including the police chief's advisory team, for their input. Final implementation is expected this week, and training will begin very soon. For a hiring update, the Director of Administrative Services, formerly called the Chief of Staff, interviews have been completed for that position, and final applicants are in the background investigation phase. The hiring of a civilian public information officer, Human Resources is actively working on this hiring process. For a recruiting update, with Grand Rapids Public Schools, we've met with Larry Johnson from Grand Rapids Public Schools and talked about recruiting for youth programs and possible participation in the new Public Safety Academy that's going to be housed at Ottawa Hills High School. We have also discussed increasing positive non-enforcement contacts in all Grand Rapids Public Schools by guest presenting, attending athletic events and practices, and visiting with the students at lunch. We also had meetings with Grand Rapids Community College. We met with Director Reese and discussed a joint recruiting effort for the Grand Rapids Promise Zone, the Police Explorer Program, the Police Internship Program, and for our open police officer positions. Our current efforts with Grand Rapids Community College include, since 2017, we have hired 10 officers that have graduated from Grand Rapids Community College's pre-service track program. It's a 2-semester program. We currently employ 8 interns that are attending Grand Rapids Community College. We've had an additional 3 interns that started at GRCC but have transferred to a 4-year institution. Grand Rapids Police Department command personnel assist with entrance interviews for the prospective applicants into the academy. During the academy, Grand Rapids Police Department personnel also participate as evaluators in the academy's mock interview process. This is done to prepare recruits for employment interviews upon completion of the academy. 2 Grand Rapids police officers currently instruct classes at the Police Academy, and 1 officer assists with the Grand Rapids Community College boot camp. Grand Rapids police recruiters attend GRCC's career fairs and their Latino Youth Conference every year. Grand Rapids Community College partners with us and administers the NCOLS physical agility portion of the testing for the Grand Rapids Police Department police recruit position. Our current staffing situation here at the Grand Rapids Police Department is we are projecting an additional 20 vacancies of police officer positions in the next 12 months. With the current hiring freeze, this will drastically reduce our ability to place officers in every neighborhood. In order to run the sponsored police recruit process of 10 officers, initiation of this process would need to begin prior to the end of this month. An additional class of certified officers, an additional 10, would need to be hired in May to offset the pending vacancies. For the timeline, on October 30th, city staff will present a financial analysis of fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 21 mid-year and future forecasts. The commission will discuss a fiscal year 2021 reprioritization strategy and fiscal year 2022 prioritization. On December 15th, City Manager Washington will propose any mid-year budget amendments as needed. In February, city staff will provide a citywide fiscal year 2021 mid-year performance management update, and the police will provide its first quarterly strategic plan update. The police department will provide performance updates on a quarterly basis in 2021. June 30th, 2023, the police department will complete their strategic plan and report on the outcomes. I will now turn it over to Ms. Allison Sutter, who will talk about the police metrics dashboard.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Reifenberg. Appreciate being back with you today. As I shared a little bit with respect to how our metrics dashboard works earlier in our performance management report, I'll keep this introduction fairly short. But just reminding everyone that the police metric dashboard was launched in early August, and it is available at the grandrapidsmi.gov/GRPD dashboard link. And that this is phase 1 that includes 23 metrics that are available, but the police department will continue to work to add more metrics as they're able. As I mentioned earlier, just emphasizing our demographics statement that was made in partnership with Ms. Stout from our Office of Equity and Engagement. Similar to the city's strategic plan, the police are committed to disaggregating all data by race, ethnicity, gender identity, and geography to the extent possible. I encourage everyone to click on the link and access our demographic statement to better understand the information that we're collecting and how we're able to disaggregate that data at this time. As reviewed earlier, these are the key components that you'll see for each of the metric items. I think most importantly, the color helps indicate the status of the metric. So green would be that the goal's been met. Yellow is that the the performance is near goal. Blue is that we're currently measuring the metric and a goal still needs to be established. And red would be that the goal has not yet been reached. And for each of these metrics, anyone can click on the link for additional details. We've worked very hard and really appreciate police staff time in getting all of the data for those 23 metrics to try to show 5 years of historic data for the metrics. And all people have access to the raw data via the dashboard. And some additional information is provided for each of those metrics around the background on the data as well as the demographics. There were 6 categories of metrics that were built out for the phase 1 of the dashboard. You can see here they're organized by accountability, budget, community engagement, crime statistics, criminal charge statistics, and staffing. The key updates that happened since the initial presentation in early August are that under accountability, the internal affairs complaints have been broken out to show internal versus external complaints. And there also were 2 metrics added to the dashboard reflecting the number of mandatory as well as elective training hours that police personnel participated in. And then with respect to crime statistics, 2 additional statistics were added to those that had already been presented, and that includes robbery and burglary. So just a note on the crime statistics. So there are two different places that people can find information with respect to crime statistics. And the first that I want to give a quick summary of is what's referred to as the crime mapping website. And this provides initial and preliminary data on a real-time basis that anyone can access, but it only provides the 6 months most recent data. And this is really a big shout out to our police department, who through their commitment to the Open Data Initiative committed to providing data to this dashboard. And you'll see there are many other cities that have also made these commitments and are available on the website, and they are not as thoroughly reporting on all of the different crime statistics as well as our Grand Rapids Police Department is doing. So second, of course, we talked about our very own police metric dashboard. This provides very robust historic information and data and some additional details, the breakdown by demographics, and some other really important information. So this dashboard is updated on approximately a quarterly basis, and it's delayed because the police department has to spend some time vetting the data because things change in the data based on new details that are discovered during criminal investigations. And so between the two, we hope that these sources both can help you and the community best understand and provide the information that's desired with respect to crime statistics. So for my part, to wrap up, this is included in the formal police strategic plan that was completed, but just to emphasize kind of the current state of policing through some of the metrics and some of the trends. In the community survey that was completed at the end of last year, 63% of residents rated their overall feeling of safety as excellent or good. But when we break that down, it was only 46% for Black and African American and only 49% for Latinx respondents. For fiscal year 21, you authorized 297 police officers in the budget. 84% of beats were covered 24/7, 365 in January through March. 11% of our police employees and 17% of our new hires were Black, Indigenous, or people of color in fiscal year 2020. And in comparison, of course, the most recent data we have is from the 2010 census tract, but in the Grand Rapids community, 41% of our residents were BIPOC. 80.29 total Part 1 and Part 2 crimes were committed per 1,000 residents in 2019. This is a 4% reduction from 2018. On the dashboard, you can look at how that differs. Part 1 crimes actually went up and increased a little bit, and Part 2 crimes decreased. The new metric on the dashboard will show that our officers took part in 29,000 hours of training, both mandatory and elective, during 2019. And just a little over 10%, unfortunately, of turnover in the police department, which is the highest in the last 5 years, and due to some of the aging and retirements that Deputy Chief Reifenberg alluded to earlier. Our police personnel participated in 269 community events in 2019 and as a community, we experienced 871 gunfire incidents that were reported to 911 in 2019, which was a 28% increase over 2018 and the highest in 5 years. We've been working to look at the January through June data of this year to compare that. And right now the data is showing that we're actually trending a little higher than what January through June was in 2019. So a continued trend of increase around gunfire incidents. And then finally, as City Manager Washington stated in the beginning, with the amendments and the adjustment to the police budget, the police budget now accounts for 37.4% of the general fund for fiscal year 21. It was a $55 million adjusted budget. Just shy of 80% of that is for police personnel, and this was a reduction from the initially approved budget, which was at 38.6%. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Chief Payne.
Thank you, Ms. Sutter. As we conclude our presentation, I want to reemphasize that our strategic plan is specific. It provides defined action steps with measurable outcomes that will fundamentally transform policing in Grand Rapids to a neighborhood-based policing model that will help us build trust and maintain trust with our community. You will notice that the largest part of the plan is the engagement section. This was done intentionally as we have heard from the community that they want more positive engagement with their police, and we are dedicated to making that happen. This plan is also a living document, able to change and fit the needs of the department and the desires of the community. This moment is an important turning point for our department's relationship with our community. We will focus on developing mutual trust through mutual respect with members of our community. Our strategies will help build a stronger bond and a safer neighborhood for all. The decisions we make today and in the coming future around this plan will impact the lives of everyone we serve. In order to make this plan work for everyone, we must at the very least, retain our current resources. And in some cases, we may need more commitment from the city as we move to implement innovative changes. With agency turnover and the current hiring freeze, the department will not be able to implement this plan successfully. Today, I call for your strong support for this transformational plan. Your support will signal to our community that we are united in advancing equity, justice, and reform in Grand Rapids. I also ask for your support of our police department and the officers who tirelessly serve our community every day. Their work is critical to keeping our neighborhoods and communities safe. I firmly believe that working together in unity is the only path forward and the only way we can make lasting change. We cannot let our differences divide us. We are stronger together. This notion is what drove me to prioritize our values of service, equity, and integrity and accountability. It steered me toward the vision of partnership with the community, and it was the foundation of our mission to ensure all people are safe and are safe at all times. As we transform our policing model, we will engage community members. We welcome honest, constructive feedback so we can adjust what we are doing to ensure we are connected to our community and align with my stated vision for policing in Grand Rapids. We look forward to continuing our work with and for our community. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present our strategic plan. We are now happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Let me see if our city manager, did you want to say anything before I make a comment to my colleague?
I just want to reemphasize my appreciation to the department and all those who contributed towards the work, and look forward to your feedback.
All right. Thank you, City Manager. So I'll start first. Chief, I really want to thank you for all of your work and your leadership, including, thank you to your entire team who have been working really hard over the last several months to bring this forward. Also want to thank Gary Peterson. I know we all know him and appreciate his support of the department, not just in the past, but through this process. I want to highlight a couple things, and I'm sure my colleagues saw this as well. I really appreciated reading through the red line version of the draft plan. It, in my opinion, shows how much change was made based on community input. So commissioners, if you've had a chance to look at the original one and then the red line one, I think you too will see the tremendous amount of input that went into making the changes that are before us today in this final plan that the chief is presenting. And then, Chief, I know you've heard this from all of us, including community members, our real serious concern with the increase in gun violence and homicides that we've seen this year. I know the department is aggressively working to, proactively and reactively address the increase in violence. I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit more, as well as your thoughts on timeline for implementing an evidence-based violence prevention program.
Yes, Mayor. We are actively looking for funds for that, and we're looking to partner with any group that's out there to have funding for that. I just want to point out, as I mentioned, our approach has changed from what we would have historically have done in the past. We are engaging with the neighbors and talking to them about what they're looking for in the community. As I pointed out, in one weekend, we took 11 or 10 illegal guns off the street. That's going to be our part. We will continue to work with groups to identify funding for evidence-based crime reduction strategies. Sorry, I don't have a specific timeline on it right now, but it's something I'm very much interested in working toward in getting that funding.
Mayor, if I could, just to add to the chief's remarks. So part of it is obviously with preventative presence through enforcement, as the chief is talking about, this proactive patrol. The other part, I think, is other collaborative efforts like the gun buyback program, which I think you heard Deputy Chief Reifenberg mention. There will likely, or Deputy Chief Kilroy Reifenberg likely mentioned that there will be 2 opportunities in the latter month of October, partnering with the Safe Task Force. The third on there's some conversation, obviously, that's happening at the county level around an evidence-based crime reduction program. And I don't know if they're specifically looking at one model. I think our concern would be we want to make sure we get the best model. So we have $75,000 that's reserved now. I've been talking with our financial services office to see if there's a way that we could perhaps find funding by redeploying some of the COVID allocations that we've had. And as we move towards our prioritization retreat on the 30th, I think we'll have a better feel if this is something that we can do with other local units of government, or is this something that would be better served by having a specific city focus? Because if we want to make sure that whatever we do is not only helpful for other communities with the crime that they're experiencing, but also make sure that it's targeted with what's happening in Grand Rapids. So I know the county's having some conversations, but we have not built any model collectively with them together at this point.
Thank you, City Manager. All right, I'll open it up for questions and comments. Commissioner Jones, did you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and thank you to Chief Payne again for the update, for the time spent hearing from community, and I think more than anything, following through on that pledge to listen. And I want to suggest that I believe that the department is going in the right direction. I applaud your leadership in the effort and the fact that you're doing this at a time in which there is significant unrest with regards to some of the gun violence that we're seeing in our community, in particular, and the community violence. And I just want to again applaud you and your leadership, as well as applaud the officers in their work and leaning in and getting at these local crime issues in particular. I know that there's been really good success in solving the crimes. I know that I definitely want to applaud the efforts to be more strategic in your efforts when you're looking to reduce the crime. And so taking a more concentrated, strategic look at proximity and who's doing what, and really just, again, aggressively addressing the issue. I can't say enough. The results speak for themselves. I'm very pleased with that thus far. I also want to make mention, Mayor and colleagues, I think we're pretty close, just on my end, in terms of having dollars raised that would allow us to move forward with the implementation of cure violence. I'm working diligently. There's proposals that have been submitted to local funders. We continue that work on behalf of the Urban League, and I am very, very optimistic that we will be in a position pretty soon here where we can announce the implementation of it. And I've had substantive conversations with colleagues over at the county, in particular the legal counsel, who has just been, and they've been very helpful in really articulating what the dollars can be used for, and that aligns well with the work of cure violence, and most importantly, just in the near future, being able to have interrupters or street outreach workers present in community, really doing the work in many ways similar to Cure Violence, and that is to disrupt and to interrupt some of the violence that's in play. All of the evidence speaks to a good chunk of what's happening in our community is really retaliatory in nature. And so it's just cats who are, there's beef amongst folks, but it's just I think back in the day when I was younger, it was, you push me, I push you, we fight. And, maybe I win, maybe you win, maybe there's another beef and then it's squashed. Well, obviously it's different now. It's a different mentality, different mindset. And yet it's similar in nature in terms of how this thing starts in the first place, which is, I want to suggest, the violation of one's dignity and folks feeling disrespected. And so there's no doubt that, again, it's being it's looked at, through a microscope now because of the environment that we're in, and the fact that we believe that, and when I say we, the Urban League and others who are engaged in this work believe that it's a direct correlation to COVID-19 and the stress that has come from COVID-19. And so it's just all kind of come to a head. And this is unfortunately part of the response. And so, again, Chief, thumbs up to you and the department, and just want to encourage you to keep up the good work. And I know that it's not easy. And I know that, again, we all have a role to play, whether it be us as the commission, city staff, county staff, neighbors. Everyone has a role to play. And I think that's when we will see significant success, is when we all recognize that we have a role to play and we walk in that purpose. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, other commissioners for comments or questions? Commissioner Moody?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I just want to commend the chief for a report well done, and just want to encourage him to continue on communicating with the community and this commission, and to encourage his officers to keep their heads up and to continue to do their job to the best of their ability.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Repper, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, sure. I just want to say that I too appreciate having the red line version, because you can really see that a lot of attention was given to the feedback that was provided by the community. I particularly am grateful that that your team sat down with Link Up, the UCC, and NAACP, because they paid for an analysis to be done of it, which I really is thorough, and I really appreciated what they were able to bring forth from that. And I think that the commitment to meet with those entities on a regular basis is incredibly proactive and is going to be helpful in terms of continuing to refine this plan even further in real time as it's being implemented. And this implementation plan is unreal. I just want to say, my goodness, that is a lot of work. I love the detail. I love that it's public and posted for everybody to see. And I'm just really thankful for that level of detail on the implementation plan. So thank you for this. I have a little bit of work yet to kind of get through a couple of the areas where I have specific questions, but I'll make sure to ask those at another time. But just wanted to express my gratitude for those few things.
Thank you, Commissioner. I agree. It's a very comprehensive action plan. So thank you for elevating that. Commissioner O'Connor, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. I too just want to say thank you to the chief and the plan, and as well as the folks in our department who are going to have to, like they have done every time in my 5 years as a commissioner. Every time we've asked them to make a change or to modify the way they conduct their business, they do it. Sometimes maybe it's not, might not be something that they look forward to doing, but they've stepped up to the plate at every opportunity and really taken on anytime this commission's asked them to change the way they do policing in Grand Rapids. And so I know that this too will be something that has challenges ahead, but I'm looking forward to seeing this plan play out and continuing to support the good work of the Grand Rapids Police Department when it's done well, and continuing to hold folks accountable when it's not done well. And so thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Lanier, did you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, and the DCs who also presented, and any other staff members that contributed to this plan. I have not, after receiving it last night, personally gone through all of it, but I'm looking forward to spending time looking closely at it and providing any questions that I have about it in advance. I'm also looking forward to an easily digestible financial supplement document to the plan so that we can kind of fully understand the budget implications of what you are recommending. And I think the city manager spoke to how the majority of it, I think he said over 80%, can be absorbed in the existing police budget. But in light of the call and the request for budget reductions, I'm just curious of how that element of community feedback is being taken into consideration. And I think, Chief, I appreciate your update on what's happening, to the mayor's question about what's happening currently in our city. And I just like to ask an additional question to that, because people are wondering and asking what is contributing to the violent acts. And so whatever you feel comfortable sharing, I think would be important for people to know. I think in a previous update, you talked about that the acts that are transpiring are domestic in the sense that people are aware of the other person who is committing the violent act, and sometimes retaliation. But because we've seen an increase in gunfire in moving vehicles in very dense population in neighborhoods, people are growing more concerned about their personal safety in their homes. And so if you could talk a little bit about, are these acts still domestic in the sense that they are connected, that people are connected? Have they become random, so that people can understand what's transpiring, and how are we trying to help minimize the gunfire that's happening that feels more random with the drive-by acts?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Chief, before you respond to that, and one last question. I'm really concerned too about the families who are impacted, as well as the residents who are nearby. And I know in a safe recommendation years ago, we talked about, and I think you had it in your strategic plans. You can remind me if it's in there or not. Well, we talked about bringing everyone together after a violent act transpires, so that they can have even the mental support, so that they can digest and have conversations about and process what they've just experienced. In the past, someone is shot, dead bodies are on the ground, people see it, go back inside, eat dinner, and go to school the next day. And we know that that's having a negative impact on people. And so I'm just curious to know, what are we doing with the victims and their families and the neighbors who are living around those victims?
Yeah, Commissioner, as far as the violence is not random, for the most part, it is specific to people knowing each other. It is occurring. My concern, like everyone else, is it's occurring throughout the city. So it's not random. I wouldn't call it random. I think people are aware who they're engaging with in this type of act. One of the things, engagement is really huge, a part of this plan, and what I believe will help us and working within the community. To your second question, well, I'll back up to the first one. And I don't know if Gary's still on. Unfortunately, this seems to be a national trend. It's not unique to Grand Rapids. It's occurring in other places. I have some control over Grand Rapids, so that's my concern. I'm not going to pawn it off that it's happening everywhere. We have to do our best to minimize the amount of gunfire that's occurring out there. It's not acceptable. To the second part of your question, presenting it at Public Safety today, we'll have our victims advocate presenting that has been reaching out to families in the community that have been victimized by gunfire to steer them toward resources that can help them process what is occurring out in the neighborhoods. So that's one of the steps that we've instituted this year, is having that victim advocate working with people in the community that has been impacted. I also know Mr. Davis, this past weekend, I believe, had a session where counselors were brought in for people to come and speak to them. So there are several different things that are being done. We need for that to continue, but most importantly, we need to work with the community in reducing the amount of violence that is occurring out there.
Thanks, Chief. And yeah, if Gary is still on, I'd like to kind of hear what the national perspective is. If this is increasing, I'm curious to know what they believe is nationally is causing this.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Gary is on, and I'll turn it over to him. But I can tell you that I've had multiple meetings and conversations with other mayors from throughout the country, and many cities are seeing an escalation in gun violence and homicides this year. So I'll turn it over to Gary. I think he has a better sense of the data and the research, but I know I'm hearing it from colleagues as well.
Yeah, Mayor Bliss, you're absolutely correct. There has been an uptick in violence in most urban cities across America. So it's not unique to Grand Rapids, but doesn't diminish the impact to your residents. So yes, that is a true statement. And like Chief Payne laminated, they are taking steps to address the issues with the crime victims. And the sense is that increasing getting a better relationship with the community, you're going to be able to solve more crimes and impact that in that way as well. So thank you.
And I'll add, Gary, I believe not only solve but prevent. If we have as we build better relationships with the community and the community working with us, it should be a desired effect that we prevent crimes from occurring. When we build that trust up, when someone can call and let us know that there's something going on. And so that's where I believe this plan will help address that, and to further build the trust with the community and officers trusting of the community.
Yeah, the chief's exactly right. Building trust is a longer term strategy where you do get feedback from the community and can take preventative measures before something actually happens. So yeah, that's correct, Chief.
Mayor, if I could also, what I'm hearing from other managers is the same concern about many of the social challenges that COVID has accelerated. So what COVID has done is it has amplified or accelerated disparities of health, economic disparities, and also issues around socioeconomic challenges to managing crime. And so many of these cities were already having challenges before COVID, but with the shutdown of the economy, all the issues around lack of socialization, stress, not having good positive opportunities to engage has also contributed some to what we're experiencing. So I think that there are multiple factors, and in addition to the high unemployment rate and other issues that have been part of the economy.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager. And then Commissioner Sassi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Chief Payne and everyone that presented, and a special thanks because I had asked for some other information last week and Chief Payne and DC Reichenberg did share that with me. So thank you in the midst of prepping for this presentation. My question is really wanting to go back to what Commissioner Lanier said around what people are feeling or what are they asking us. So I'm glad to see the process moving along with the public information officer. I think, there are different times where we're communicating for information, we're communicating about the aspiration of the kind of city that we are. I think there are some realities of living, as we talked about, living in an urban setting. Certainly we want people to feel safe. And, I was born here, I grew up here, and, I think it is a very different city than then, but I think it is for the better. So I think the public information piece is absolutely key. The other piece I wanted to lift up was just that, really, glad to see all the work with the HOT team and what has been done specifically for mental health and social services. We still have, I think at the end of this year, our Seeking Safety grant is going to be ending with the Department of Justice. And I think that, personally, I know people who have benefited from the interventions of the Family Outreach Center, as Commissioner Lanier said, to post somebody experiencing a shooting that happened to themselves or their family members, or maybe they were part of that shooting by being the one with the gun. So I think that is just important to continue to look at, because it's also a space with other people. As we look at other violence reduction strategies, is a space where other people who have been through that traumatic experience of gun violence come to be together. And I will tell you, it is very traumatic. Unfortunately, I had somebody that I love this year who was shot. Last year, I had somebody that I love that was shot. This is very personal to me. And it's personal to a lot of the people who call in at our commission meetings, who reach out to us and say, how can we work to end this gun violence in our city? So, I think the work that was done in preparation for this, it is just the beginning, and that I'm very happy to have this. I'm very happy to continue to work to support, and also to say that it is just the beginning. So there's never an end to this, because unfortunately we will hear of another violent act. We will hear of somebody who's experienced something that we don't want to happen in our city. The third point I wanted to make was around technology. So this is an area that I will appreciate. I know in the past from public safety that there's already been some conversations with different constituencies about concerns as it relates to how can we make this investment in technology and reduce the amount of resources, but also know that people have concerns about their constitutional rights. And so that is a very, I go back and forth about what I feel. I did go to the presentation last year with public safety on that. So I think that's an area to continue to lift up. And, we received an update last week from Assistant City Manager Matthews about our new survey system that we're using, that some people have already started to get. So I know one of the first surveys is around policing and funding, but I would also say I would love to see something around technology. I know there was feedback, but that is, to me, is another area as we continue to work towards Hillard Hines and implement this strategic plan. Last week, Commissioner Lanier and I had a chance to sit down with our neighborhood association groups from all 3 wards. And, I think the last time we met with them and this time, there was concern about how do they fit into this plan, and really asking about, that they're receiving, specific money through our community development office. Many of them are working on, their own strategies in their communities around violence prevention. And so I would just say, I think I mentioned that in the draft plan. I too haven't gone through all of it, but to continue to make that connection, I think there's a strong desire. And Chief Payne, I know that you met with them already this past summer, and I know you're committed to continuing to do that. But I think that is something that could be more intentional in the plan as well, with our neighborhood associations. And then the last comment I have is around acts of civil unrest or protesting. I think as a community, we need to continue to prepare. There's been a lot of national events that have happened over this past couple of months, and certainly over this past year. We're facing a very, a significant national election here. And I just think that we will continue to see people who find that the way that they want to channel their excitement or frustration or energy is by going out and exercising their rights to engage. And, we've talked about doing it safely during COVID, but I just wanted to, I guess I had a lot of comments, but my specific question, Chief, well, if you could specifically respond to the neighborhood associations, but then also just talk a little bit about, and not certainly the operational things, but just talk about that continued plan of responding to, civil gatherings and things like that, that will probably continue at least until it snows in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. All good questions. Chief?
Yes, as far as the neighborhood associations, we did incorporate a portion in there. I don't know exactly where it falls under, but we did receive the feedback of them being a very vital role in this. And I have always valued, and the department has always valued the neighborhood associations out there. So we'll continue to engage with them. Commissioner, to your comment or your thoughts on this civil unrest that have occurred. I've seen communities that have had continuous civil unrest since May 30th. We have fortunately not had that. Now, in preparation, as you mentioned, there's a significant election coming up. We will continue to use our analysts to gather all information that we can. And we'll be prepared for if we believe that it's going to be unrest as opposed to people voicing their right. We welcome people that voicing their First Amendment right, and we'll be as little involved in those events as we can. But again, we have to make sure we're looking at everyone's safety, keeping the protesters safe and the community safe. But that is something that we will continue to monitor as the previous events and the election comes up.
I have one other thank you, Chief. One other comment, Mayor, or question. I think you specifically talked about working, and you shared that with the draft plan, working again on the priority calls and working with mobile GR. I think another issue that has just continuously come up in my tenure on commission, which has just been since January, is, speeding in neighborhoods. And, I think oftentimes it's, there's that response directly going to your department, non-emergency line, oftentimes working with the neighborhood association. But, I just continue to see that as a major issue, whether it's, somebody putting something on social media or somebody, calling and sharing their concern. And so I trust that will still continue to be part of that work as you work with mobile GR, which is already the case. But I feel like that's another issue that has consistently come up in all of our neighborhoods, specifically during COVID. Thanks.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And citywide, that continues to be our number one complaint, speeding. And having officers dedicated to that, addressing that is part of what this plan calls for. Bring up their time so they can address those concerns of the speeding and high crash intersections. There's something else that we're going to prioritize and have been. So your point is well taken. It's something that we're aware of. And that, as I mentioned, that's one of the that's probably consistently the biggest complaint we receive is speeding. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. All really important comments and questions. And again, I'll say thank you to the Chief and the entire team and the City Manager for all their work in bringing this forward today. This is continuous improvement and it is ongoing. I appreciated the last slide that says it's not the end, it's just the beginning. I think all of us recognize that there is a lot of work to be done, but that we, as Commissioner Jones said, we are all in this together. So thank you again. City Manager, any final comments before we recess and close Committee of the Whole? Looks like we're good. Gary, thank you again for joining us today. So commissioners, just a few reminders. Those of us who serve on legislative team, we are meeting at 2 p.m. and then public safety meets today at 3. And then we're back here tonight at 7 p.m. We have a full agenda and a scheduled public hearing tonight. And outside of what's happening in these four walls here at City Hall, there's an important presidential debate. So hopefully we'll be able to catch at least a portion of that. And with that, I will call this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.